This is Alexander Constantine, and you are listening to the Deceneus Review. It's another beautiful afternoon in the Low Country, and we are here for what will become a weekly open discussion between friends. This week, yet again, Mr. Fisto Sobani returns, so grab yourself a cup of coffee, and let's get started. Good afternoon, Fisto. How are you doing?
Hey man, I'm doing pretty well. We are enjoying Florida's rainy season.
Oh, it's
Currently downpouring like the proverbial cats and dogs at the moment. I should have warned you about that. I could lose connection at some point, but
I mean, if you guys get it,
we'll see.
if you guys get it, we're going to get it in a few hours because
Hmm.
everything from Florida comes up.
I did not know that. I mean, I
yeah,
knew that, but like I didn't know that the rainy season, you're like, okay. So if
yeah,
you want to know what the weather's going to be, you can just ask me.
basically, right? I mean,
Nice.
we get like everything from Jacksonville, and it comes right up to us. The hurricanes tend to miss where I'm at, and they tend to
Hmm.
hit Charleston instead, which
Yeah.
is fine by me. But I am preparing my hurricane escape kit in my garage.
I was thinking about this earlier. Hurricane season down here is said with the same energy that I said rainstorm earlier or that I said rainy season earlier. Like it's just whatever.
It just is,
Yeah, it's just fact of life down here. Don't worry about it. Unless it's like a Cat 5 banger, everybody's like, eh.
right. I lived through it. Well, I was here for the last two hurricanes.
Yeah.
That the one 2 years ago, and then the one last year, which was kind of a dud. Well, it wasn't a dud to parts of Florida, but it was definitely a
Yeah,
dud
yeah,
when
yeah.
it hit South Carolina.
Yeah, I
Uh,
think you're talking about the one that hit like Fort Myers and up near, not Fort Myers, up near
yeah, they
Sarasota.
had some pretty bad flooding
Yep.
up there. Well, down there for me.
Yeah. No. Not to say that hurricanes cannot do their business, but again,
I mean,
fact of
we had
life.
earthquakes and fires back in California, so it's a
Yeah.
different experience. So, first of all, for all the
Yes.
listeners, last week we made a mistake. Well, I made a mistake because I fell for some fake news propaganda, but it wasn't propaganda. The left wing websites were the ones reporting it, and Noam Chomsky is not dead.
Yes, correct. He has not passed on. He has not joined the choir invisible.
Supposedly,
He
he's
is
not dead.
not an ex-parrot. He's very much an alive parrot.
Right. So I found that out like maybe like a few hours after we ended, and I was like, ah, whatever. We still led
That
to
was
an
pretty
interesting
funny.
conversation
Now, you saw the news today, or you saw the news that was earlier today, right?
about Assange.
Yeah. So hopefully that's true. And we're not all about to find out tomorrow that, oh, just kidding.
Right.
He's dead in a ditch somewhere.
So the other sad news, well, not Assange thing is not sad, but
Oh, that's
the
great
other
news. Like first good news of 2024, I
really,
think. Anyway.
I'm actually not very well like versed in the Assange drama. I'm not really as familiar with it. I know he released some. He was a WikiLeaks guy, right?
The WikiLeaks guy.
Right.
That's his baby. That's his thing. He's the man, the myth, the legend behind it. I'm not an expert in it either, but I've followed him a little bit more closely only because I started getting kind of reality pilled by the time Snowden started doing his stuff. So naturally, I found out about Assange.
Right, and he's been in Russia for the last few years or
That's
something. Or
Snowden. Snowden's been in
Snowden's
Russia.
in Russia. See,
Assange has been. Um, People can correct me if I'm wrong, but if I recall last, he was in a prison in the UK. He'd been there for, I think, 62 months, which is, he ended up just getting time served. And then before that, he was in the Ecuadorian embassy in London, I think. And he was trapped there for like 6, 7 years or something. Basically, this whole thing's been going on for, I think, 12 or 13 years
oh
or
yeah,
something
I
like that.
remember. I was
Yeah,
I
this
was like in
guy's
my
been through the ringer.
early 20s when that was
Yeah,
way back in, was it George Bush days,
Iraq
I
War.
think.
Yeah, Iraq War.
Right, it's
George
wild.
Bush, the whole collateral murder video, I think is what it
Right,
was,
right.
or one of the things.
I
Anyway,
oh
doesn't matter.
I confused Snowden with Assange, and then with
Oh,
that
that's fair.
that that dude that became a woman. He was like in the army and ran away or something like
Um,
that.
oh my gosh, the name is I'm blanking on the name.
Right. Those
I
three,
was thinking
like,
about
because
it.
they're kind of like in the same category. I know they're not the same, but they're it's kind of
Yeah,
that whole that it was like that era of conversation, and honestly, like I was not too paying too much attention. I was busy being a degenerate. But you know who died? So okay, one thing about me
Who
that
died?
people probably don't know
Manning.
this, right?
Sorry, Chelsea Manning, or now known as Chelsea
Chelsea
Manning.
Manning, you're right. That
Yep.
Chelsea Manning or Private
Yeah, those
Manning,
three are kind of those three people. It was all around that time when that stuff was happening.
because people were whistleblowing and the whole
Right.
thing.
Yep.
Um, so people might not know about me, but I get weird obsessions with certain stuff, and
No, never.
one of my one of my weird music obsessions, right, is 60s music. And I'm not talking about like hippie music, all right? I like I like 60s girl band music, right?
Okay.
And like the freaking, three black girls singing type of music, like
Yeah, sure.
late 50s, 60s, like one of my favorite bands, which I consider like the first bad girl band is the Shangri-Las.
Oh,
Um,
wow. Okay.
and she died in like
Ah,
February, right? The lead singer to
okay.
that band. But kind of a weird obsession I had because I was doing research for some work I was writing is I really like French yeye music. Have you ever heard of that
Okay.
before?
Never, never, ever have I ever.
So French yeye music is like it's a French girl pop music.
Okay.
And it was kind of like how what's the Korean pop called right now?
K-pop.
Not hip hop, but like
No, I said K-pop. Like
oh,
K is in
K-pop, right.
Korean.
It was
Yeah.
kind of like K-pop, but the French 1960s like mod version of it in a way.
Okay. Gotcha.
And
Gotcha.
way cooler because it was French. And I'm kind of a
Way cooler because it was
Francophile.
French.
I'm kind of a
That's
Francophile
fine. Nobody's perfect. It's fine.
when it comes to European stuff. I'm not an Anglophile. I'm sorry, guys. Okay, I do not like beans on toast. Um,
The beans on toast. Get my
right?
musket.
And freaking buck teeth or whatever Anglos have. I'm sorry, guys. Sorry. The British are the only people on the planet whose males are better looking than their females, but that's just me.
Well, you've met some. You haven't met the right birds, man. That's all I'm. That's all I'm gonna say.
Maybe.
You haven't
You know
read the
what?
right birds.
Maybe.
There's a few of
Maybe
them
I'm
that are just
wrong.
pristine.
Every now and then. But anyway, so my favorite and who I believe was in her youth, in her heyday, one of the most beautiful women of all time, Francoise Hardy, died on the 11th of June. And if you're not familiar with Francoise Hardy,
I'm not. I'm actually
look
looking her up right now.
look up some of her pictures.
Oh, okay.
She was
Actually, I think I do.
gorgeous,
Wow.
and her music was
Oh my
great.
God, you're not kidding.
Right. And she
Perfection.
was just everything. She had the style
Yeah.
and
No, I see it. 19, yeah, the 19. That's the 1960s French vibe right there.
right.
I
And
feel like I feel like that. I feel like I saw this in a Quentin Tarantino movie.
you know what? Quentin Tarantino takes a lot from the French expressionist movies,
Yeah.
and
I was
they
thinking of the female lead in Inglorious Bastards. Actually, that's what it reminded me of instantly. But anyway,
absolutely. I think that's where he gets a lot of his
yeah,
his
I
style
see
for
it.
that
I see
French
it
thing.
completely.
But yeah, she passed
Hmm.
away, and I think she was 80,
Yeah,
and
that's what it says here.
so I might be one of the only people in the United States that listens to Francois Hardy. Maybe
Yeah,
two.
wow, she had quite the life. Holy smokes.
Well, look, she was married to, and she was I think she was with Sir Ginsburg, who was one ugly motherfucker. If you look at pictures of him, French dudes tend to be really ugly. They all look like Michelle Welbeck,
Yeah.
and then French women are attractive. And then I feel like the inverse for the British, but that's my opinion.
Yeah.
What do I know? I need
Author, astrology career. I'm just looking through the Wikipedia page for like an overview.
so for you guys, I would
Ooh.
recommend giving some YouTube videos of Francois Hardy a listen to. They're pretty good. I might even write a little bit of a write up on French pop music from the 60s for Alexander's
That'd
Facebook.
be cool. Yeah, I see your fashion icon,
Oh
like
yeah, I
all
mean
this stuff.
she was she was awesome. I mean she was a contemporary of that Bridget Bardot era, and Bridget Bardot was beautiful also. And I think now she's
Yeah.
canceled because she's like a right wing fascist or something.
Wait, so you were saying her married this Jacques Dutronc? That guy? Is that how you
Yeah,
say
but she
that?
was also dating this guy.
He
I
ain't
think
so bad.
there's this guy named Serge Ginsburg that she used to do music with. Serge Ginsburg, Real
I'm
ugly
looking for the
dude.
name.
But the dude probably like slept with like 2,000 women.
French. That's just France.
Right. Which, makes me want to go pop open some Welbeck books. Have you ever read a Welbeck novel?
I have not. No.
Welbeck is probably the best contemporary writer right now living, but he is very, very nihilistic French stuff, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so that's the news of the world that I care about so far. What have you been? Well, you know what? What have you been up to in the
What have I
last
been up
week?
to? Well, we are approaching the end of summer school. I have just a couple more days helping out with that. And then after, I have pretty much July wide open. I don't have really all that much planned. I think I might have mentioned last week that we're going to be taking a little trip down to Key West, checking that out, relaxing, having a good time, and then just bumming around town and doing whatever. As far as what I've been up to beyond that, I've continued reading Foundation. I've moved on to Foundation and Empire. There's a guy in Substack who I'm interested to see what he has to say about it. I believe the handle is pronounced fuck it all, as in life got you down, try fuck it all. Anyway,
I
cool
think
cat. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I follow him also.
He's like one of the rare no profile picture guys who's actually kind of a cool cat.
Right.
But
Not a
he was
agent of some sort.
yeah, he's not an agent of retardation by far. Anyway, he was talking about how it's kind of where it goes off the rails, and I'm interested to see what he has to say about that because I know a little bit about what happens in the story. And like for me, when I'm reading fiction, especially when it's people that I deeply respect, I'm pretty much just going to go along for the ride. Like I'm really not going to like pick it apart and like get at it. I'm just going to sit back and be like, just take me on a journey, Isaac. Like just where you want to go, brother. And I'm just
Right.
going to ride with it, right? So that makes me interested to see what he has to say because I'm not naturally inclined to read fiction critically. You know what I mean? I read it
Hmm.
for pleasure.
Right.
So I'm interested to see what he has to say about that. Um, been making my way through Hume's Will. Some folks will have noticed I've posted a couple of quotes from Mr. Younger's, dare I say, magnum opus. It is still just providing me with words and phrases and ideas for things that I did not know I had inside. So I'm loving it. Fantastic. And then I also started reading, actually, I'm going to grab a copy of it here real quick. My copy of it here real quick. I started reading the Bloomsbury History of the Spanish Civil War, the Bloomsbury Handbook to the Spanish Civil War. And this thing is
Nice.
this thing is a 500-pound monster, small type, right? And it's basically got an essay for every topic stretching across the entire war. The guys that edited it, I've been emailing with, and they told me, obviously, because they wanted to sell their book, hey, read that first. But these guys are legitimate experts, like for sure. And I'm really enjoying it. It's got some nice maps. I'm looking through them right now. But yeah, chapter 1, causes, and away we go. I'm
I mean,
learning things already, and I love it.
that's
So
fantastic.
yeah, I'm
Yeah,
about
it's still one of my favorite little side wars that
yeah,
is critical to the 20th century and to the 21st century by
yeah,
default.
yeah. It's helping me understand what Younger calls the global civil wars, right? And I've been thinking a lot about how industrialization led to the collapse of the empires in World War One, and then the ideological wars of World War Two were us basically, the global civil war trying to figure out, okay, how's this all going to work? Is it going to be liberal democracy? Is it going to be fascism? Is it going to be communism? And the Spanish Civil War is a good microcosm because it's about all of those things and more. It's the ideologies of the 20th century coming and clashing along with the problems of the 19th century, right?
Right.
Old agrarian Spain, the industrialization of Barcelona. I think it's certainly more than I ever bargained for. So anyway, that's what I've been up to.
Right. And if you want to be, if you want to kind of connect with the Spanish Civil War, you can say that most of the little civil wars throughout Latin America in the 20th
Hmm,
century are directly related due to
of course.
the Catholic
Yeah.
Catholics on the right versus the more communist Che Guevara types on the left, mixed
Yeah.
with the um, what do you call it? Liberation theologies of
Yeah.
the Jesuits
Well,
in South
it's
America.
that wouldn't surprise me. It's the collapse of the Spanish Empire. The
Right.
Spanish Empire exported the way that it does business to South America, right? The Latifundia, the hacienda, I think they call them haciendas now, or they did.
Yeah.
You
Haciendas,
know,
yeah.
so Latin America and South America is basically just, Spain. Didn't they call North America New Spain at one point?
They did. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm living in an area that used to be part of the Spanish crown, right? So
So am
yeah,
I,
it
I
would just be
think.
the same story because it's still dealing with the same. Yeah, oh, that's funny. We kind of both are. Interesting.
I think
Anyway,
Port Royal, where I'm at, was originally a Spanish colony, and it's one of the
hmm,
oldest areas in the oldest Western, European settled areas in the United States.
nice.
We had all those
But yeah, no,
pirates
that.
out here too.
Oh yeah, pirates down here, of course, absolutely. All kinds of rebels. The Seminole Wars. Oh my
Right.
gosh, I'm gonna look into those at
That
some
this whole
point once I
area, I
find
actually
time.
have this giant. I don't have video turned on, but I have this giant history book. Let me look at it real fast.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know where it is. My wife put it somewhere. It's the history of South Carolina, and it starts off in like the whole Indian Wars and
Oh
the initial colony. And I've been meaning to start it. And I'm like, man, I've got like
yes.
90 books to read. I'm never gonna get through everything. I'm gonna
That's
die.
okay. That's okay. That's a good problem to have, my friend. I've
Right,
simply accepted that I will die with a pile of books on my table.
right. I, unlike you, have not been well. I've been busy, but I've been busy in a different way. I haven't really
Yeah.
read anything. I'm going to cat. I need to. I'm rereading the Forest Passage so I can
Good.
talk about it with you better because it's been a few years since I've read it, and I'm gonna catch up with Umsul with you, and then I want to write and talk about it. Well, I want to devote an entire podcast with about Junger specifically.
Yes. Maybe a
Um,
couple.
for everybody listening that wants to get in on our Jungerisms, I do recommend the Art of Darkness episode on Junger because they do a really good job about 3 to 4 hours of going into his, just a broad history of his life.
Make
And
sure to
it's,
drop some links in the
yeah, I'll
in the
definitely drop
article
some
for the
links.
podcast. Yeah, 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 for the
And I
podcast.
mean, for you guys that don't know, Junger was born in the 19th century,
1895.
1895, and I believe he
Yeah.
died in 1995.
98,
98. Oh,
I think.
right, something like that. 95 or 98. Either way, he
Hold on,
died
I'm
when I
gonna
was
look
in
it up
high
because I have a
school.
computer.
He died when I was in high school.
Yes, March 29th, 1895, Heidelberg, Germany. Died February 17, 1998 in Reutlingen. I probably said that wrong, Germany.
Right. So he died as I was going into high school, basically,
Yep.
which
Yep.
is wild when you think about it. This is a man that was born before houses were there was electricity in houses. He
Yeah.
fought in the trenches of World War One. He
Wounded 7 times.
right. He was an officer during World War Two. Um, he wrote tons of novels and nonfiction books. Traveled the world like in his 80s, I think, if I remember his bio correctly. Like he spent, he
Hmm.
was one of the first guys to do like LSD or hallucinogens, and he died in the 90s. So he lived through the Kaiser's Germany, like Bismarck, out of Bismarck's
Oh yeah,
Germany,
all that stuff.
and he lived through the World War One. He lived
Yep.
through the Weimar Republic. He lived through all the rise of the Nazi Party, Hitler,
One of
and then
my favorite parts about his story, like when I was looking at his biography and looking at things, like, so a lot of people will know that I've talked a lot about and have written about Dietrich Bonhoeffer, the famous German pastor that died in May of 1945. A lot
right,
of Christians, he's kind of a huge hero for them, especially a lot of Protestants. I grew up hearing about this guy, but he's famous because he was part of the plot to kill Hitler. And I know that there's an idea that Younger was kind of floating around the outside of that also. But there's this great line, Adolf Hitler, leave Younger alone.
right.
And it's funny because like he's just like I think you told me this. He's this dude who just did not give a shit, and nobody could turn him. Like he didn't like the Nazis or any of that stuff. He thought he wasn't like he constantly resisted, and then after the war, everybody's like, you need to go through denazification, and he's like, no, I
No,
don't.
no.
No, here, these nuts. I don't know what the guy said, but
Right, but I mean, he
it's
probably said
just
it in a very aristocratic, younger
oh
way,
yeah,
but
he's
it's
yeah. You
basically
can't
these
push me
nuts.
around. Like nobody can push this guy around. I
Right.
love it. It's fantastic.
I think there's a I don't know if it's anecdotal or from his journals where he met Celine, the writer, the French writer in Paris,
Hmm.
and Celine, one of the greatest writers of the 20th century, hands down, but a completely like he basically a Twitter tier like anti-Semite, okay, like a 4chan tier anti-Semite, and he was more Nazi than not the Nazis were basically. He would write pamphlets pro German occupation and pro
Right.
getting rid of Jews and stuff. And I guess Younger found Celine a little bit too extra. He's like, yeah, this dude is extra, man. Like
A little
he's
too intense.
a little too intense. He's just not. He's a despicable human being. Because Jünger was out there in Paris, getting passport for his Jewish
Yeah.
friends so they could leave, while he was
Yeah.
the
Right.
commandant in charge of the Nazis in
Yes.
Paris.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
it's an interesting character.
As
And
someone who served the regime, you should probably chill the fuck out.
right. And well, ultimately, right, Jünger saw himself not as a Nazi. He
Hmm.
didn't. He didn't become an officer in the military when they offered him, to be a Nazi because he had the ideological belief. He did it because he was a nationalist and he cared about
Right.
Germany. And he's like, well,
Yeah.
whether it goes up or down, I'm going to go down with it. And that's a very interesting way to look at it.
I
Like,
love the fact that you brought that up because that is Bonhoeffer is a nationalist too. He is a German nationalist. Also, go up, go down. I'm in it to win it, right? I'm here with
right,
Germany. Whatever happens, I have to be here. I don't have a choice.
right. And then, his one of his I think one of his novels on the Marble Cliffs is really about kind of the living under fascism. And if you're reading the Forest Passage is ultimately a book about surviving and living underneath a totalitarian kind of situation, whether
Hmm.
it's like Nazi Germany or the Soviet Union. I think he had the Soviet Union and hardcore communism in mind when he wrote that book.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
But then I think by the time he gets to Umswell, which is much later in his life, I believe is like his last work.
1977. He was 82 when he wrote it.
Right? Now we're talking about living in a postmodern,
Yeah.
neo-capitalist kind of
Oh, yeah.
world.
Oh, he's calling stuff. It's amazing. It's so good.
I mean, he calls stuff in the Forest Passage, which is I think written in the 40s, that
Yeah.
was like, okay, wow, this could apply today.
1951, I think.
Yeah, even more
Anyway.
so than back in the day.
Yeah.
But we'll have a Junger only. We can talk about Junger all day, and I'm sure people will care about that. But yeah, back to what I was
Give him a
doing.
chance to read.
We're giving him a chance to read. So hey, listen,
Yeah.
guys,
Anyway, guys,
read the freaking books so we can
do
all
it.
talk about it, okay?
We're
So
assigning homework. Deal with it.
what I did is I didn't read my Junger this weekend because, like
0 out of 10. See me after class.
I am recovering from a family friend visiting, and this weekend I had to catch up on you know, me being an elite human capital, right? What I had to do was go to the grocery store like elite human capital does, and make sure I pay my bills. And I have a new dog, so I have to walk the new dog and train the new dog because I'm purebred maxing here, all right? So I have to train this brand new dog that cost me way too much money. And I also spent time with my daughter a lot playing video games and taking her to
Daughter
dance
Maxine.
dance classes and stuff. And yesterday I actually had a fantastic day. I came home from work and we invited our friends over, and our friends are easily 10, 15 years younger than us. They're like in their late 20s. So I'm 40, they're
The
12
time of
years younger than me.
innocence.
And they're a couple and they have two kids, same age as my daughter. And I inflated this big, massive, like water slide inflatable thing that my wife got. And, we grilled, watched the kids play all afternoon in the sun because it's 90 degrees down here. Dogs are playing with them, chasing them around. Cats are playing with them. It's just this madness. They're running in and out of the house. I made hot dogs. And it was really like the most amazing thing ever. And we talked about like how much we enjoyed the South because this couple, just like me and my wife, they moved to the South recently from the West. They were, I believe, Colorado people.
Okay.
And we're talking about how much more we enjoy the South compared to the West side of the United States when it comes to the politeness and friendliness of people.
Hmm.
And we talked about church because they go to church, and And we talked about just life in general and like schools and thinking of starting my daughter in a Montessori school. I don't know if you're familiar with Montessori stuff.
Vaguely, yeah.
Right.
By reputation, mostly.
Right. So that's interesting. We'll see how that goes. Um, and kind of do like a mixed school, mixed, mixed school, mixed homeschool thing.
Hmm.
Because she wants to go. She wants to go hang out with like kids and stuff. So that's kind of why I'm pushing. Like my wife wants that. But either way, I didn't really do anything at all. Like I did not catch it. The one thing, the one non-productive thing that was kind of lame was like, I shit stirred over on Substack, right?
Again.
Again. But you know what? I had to, right? So for you guys listening,
I had to listen to the exhortations of my soul.
right, I had to. So you know what? What I did right, and if you follow me on Substack, you obviously probably do because you're listening to this thing. I had to reply to Mr. Bismarck's Barstool Barney Wright manifesto. And I don't even really want to go too far into this because I'm already bored of it.
Yeah.
All right, like there's no substance there, and I know Dave Green did a stream on it, and Dave like I think his stream was like 3 hours, and I listened to the whole thing, and he like tears the whole thing up in a very logical way. Ultimately, I don't really care that much about it. To me, it's more like, no, this is just stupid, dude. Like, and people say, oh, we're not being political. It's not about politics. Listen, he's got 14 points, and like 13 of them are about banging chicks.
That turned me off ironically, turned me off so much. Not that I don't mind banging chicks. I certainly don't. I love
Right.
my girlfriend very much. She's fantastic. My fiance, I love her very much. Um, but like, you don't create a political program with 13 points all about sex. That's how you make a sex cult. Okay.
Right. And you
Like
know
this
what they'll
is
say it, man. Just do it. Just fucking do it,
just
right?
make that. Just go, just look, if that's what you want, just go make a sex cult. Okay. It's the 21st century, like you could literally hire people to do this. Okay.
And I'm
But yeah, it's
I'm
so
criticizing it
weird.
because it's like, come on, dude. Like, we're not serious here, right? There's not
Right.
a serious conversation here. The only thing that is
Right.
serious about it, and I'm not saying specifically about it itself, but the topic is that we are supposedly we're trying to influence young men somehow. And that is
Right.
probably not the best way to influence them. And that's why I'm even commenting on it because I don't want 20
Right.
year olds or whatever to read that and go, oh, that's what, 30-year-olds do, blah, blah. It's like, shut up, dude. Do not, don't. It's incoherent and it makes no sense. And I'll stick by that no matter how many friends come at me about it. It's incoherent. It makes no sense. I broke it down on my post why it makes no sense. It's all pie in the sky nonsense, right? It's the equivalent of saying, well, if I was in power, I would make everybody into a space marine and I would, you know, shut up. It's just not real.
Master
You know?
Chief, sign me the fuck up.
Right. It's just not
I'm
real.
there. I'm there. I'm there.
Right.
Just only through Halo 3 though. I'm a true Bungie man.
Well,
Okay.
so to
Anyway,
talk
just kidding.
about to talk about elite human capital.
Well, hey, real quick, there is one
Sure.
bit I want to drop in there. My ultimate issue with the discussion is the focus on defining themselves by their enemy. And they're not going to say that they're doing that, but it starts out with castrate the left, right? If you focus on just countering your enemy, number one, you're admitting you're losing because you're on the defensive, right? You don't have the initiative if you're just defining yourself by the enemy. And the second thing is you simply become the mirror of the enemy because you have no source. You have no,
Right.
Moses hitting the rock. You have no source of water that actually fuels you. It's just reacting to the other guy. So of course there's a complete obsession with sex
Because there's nothing there.
and all that stuff. Right. Yeah. Because that's what the other side is obsessing with. Well, now you're obsessing with it too. And I made the joke, but I'll stand by it. By November, that whole side of the discussion is going to get even more wokey than, it's the same picture joke. You know what I mean?
Right. It
That's my
absolutely
thought on the
is.
matter.
And
We could do better. That's what I'm trying to say.
right. And ultimately, I think one of my comments is that, like, I'm just not interested in the left. To me, it's not a right versus left thing. I have zero interest in the left. There is nothing that they do or put out that remotely even warrants a conversation because everything they do is stupid. And the best way to look at like a lefty conversation is like, shut up. It's stupid. Welcome to the real world. It's not going to happen. You've had your chance, you know. But I have no power. All
Yeah.
right. I am at best a cultural agent, and that's all I can do. And that's all I really care to do. Um, Sitting here discussing policy proposals like an imaginary like sim politics thing where
Sim
I can actually
politics.
influence like nobody influences the reptiles, okay? They're reptiles and they get their orders from their demon overlords, and there's
I
nothing I
suspect
can do.
something. I suspect something that we're dealing with, and this was a little bit of conversation that we had in the group the other day. I don't know if you saw it, but looking at the world like, hey, you have industrialization, right? World War One, World War Two. You have in that the vast majority of humans moving into cities, going from rural to city life. That was a huge change for our society. And urban, the problems with urban existence are manifest. We know that. There's a lot of benefits, but there's a lot of downsides, right?
Right.
Breakup of family, breakup of ethnic groups, breakup of religious groups. The atomization is the great word that I heard from a different spot on Substack, but the atomization of everything. And I'm not wondering if it's gone from rural to urban. And in order to solve the urban issue, we're going from real to virtual because
Right.
all of us can get what we're missing, at least we think we can, online with all of our small little groups and our small little tribes and our small little communities of, you know, under the Dunbar number, less than 150 people. And we can get what we've been missing since we've all, been shattered and thrown to the wind.
Right. We've been atomized, and it's interesting because you start to doubt like what's more real? Is our conversations online more real and more important? I
Right.
don't have this level of conversation. Well, okay, I lie. I do sit at work, and my immediate coworker is a very well educated, intelligent guy. Him and I talk about all kinds of philosophy and stuff, but he's about a decade younger than me, and it's sometimes I feel like I'm just like dropping esoteric knowledge on this guy by giving him books to read and everything. I'm gonna I'm gonna Junger pill him in the near future. We'll
Junger pill. I love it.
see how he does that. Maybe we'll go
Forest
even.
pill. Have you taken the forest pill, bro?
Dude, have you walked in the forest? What are you talking
Forget
about?
pills. Go for a walk. Go
Go for a
outside. Touch
walk.
forest.
But yeah, man, that a lot of this conversations are just they feel like make believe, they feel like you're just LARPing, like you're arguing on a 1998 message board on AOL.com or
The
something like
ideologies
that.
are exhausted. The ideologies are exhausted. I think
Right.
that's
It's like,
that's my fundamental problem with
right.
the quote unquote discourse at all. It's the same stuff I've heard over and over again. Like for example, um, what was it? Where did I see this? Oh, somebody bringing up there was this piece on Substack talking about the story of who David. Didn't he have a really close friend, John or something? I'm talking about the Bible, like Dave and John. I forget it, but it was like basically two well-known biblical characters, and they have a really close relationship. And it was a think piece about how, ooh, look, they're gay. And I'm like, I heard that stuff 25 years ago in Bible study.
What
Is this?
Frodo and Samwise are gay?
But I mean,
That's
like,
so original, guys.
yeah, like I heard that 25 years ago. Okay, well, whatever. Oh, they're putting up the Ten Commandments in Louisiana again. Oh my God. Didn't I hear a story? Didn't I hear something about that 20 years ago too? And then South Carolina with the book stuff.
Oh, that's
Wasn't this something that I heard about when I was in high school? Like it's the same stuff over.
right.
It's just the cycles.
The same
The
books
same.
have been
Yeah.
banned. It's like,
Nothing is happening. Is
has
what it feels
anybody
like.
read To Kill a Mockingbird in the last 30 years? Because I feel like it's been banned for the last 30 years.
No one's read it because it's been banned. I read it once long ago, back in the dark times before the Empire.
Right.
No, yeah, no, I did
I'm
actually
pretty
read it.
sure my high school put on a To Kill a Mockingbird play that my younger brother was the main character and he was Atticus Finch. And um,
Nice.
I think I've read that book like 3 times because it's a pretty well written book. You know, I'm
Yeah,
going to
there's a reason
ignore
people
the
teach it.
conspiracy theories about it not being written by her, but being written by Truman Capote.
Oh,
but
That's the first I've heard of that,
you
but
never heard about
whatever.
that before?
Nah, no, I haven't actually.
Oh, so
But I mean, whatever.
yeah,
I mean,
what is her
feel
name
free
that,
to tell the story. That's yeah.
what is her name that wrote it? Let me see. What is her name again? I always forget. Harper Lee, right? So
Oh yeah, Harper Lee.
Harper Lee
Good old
supposedly
Harper.
Harper Lee supposedly was childhood friends with Truman Capote, and he wrote that like a true crime in cold blood, and he's a big writer.
Yeah.
And supposedly she wrote the first draft of it and sent it to him, and he's like, "Yo, this is crap," and basically rewrote it, and then it got published. And in the rewrite, the majority of it is supposed to be his writing because it really reads like his writing. Supposedly, I don't know. I can't say. I haven't read In Cold Blood in forever or To Kill a Mockingbird.
My my gut reaction is that sounds like the kind of story Truman Capote would make up.
Right, absolutely. And the only thing that like kind of
That's the hardest evidence against it.
the only thing that gives me like any slight like okay maybe is the fact that she never wrote anything else.
Yeah.
And when they did release like the sequel to Kill a Mockingbird posthumously, which was I think they did their dirty by doing that. It sucked.
Yeah.
And
Well, one hit wonders,
right,
right?
so she's definitely a one hit wonder,
That's
but that's
okay.
fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's that's
I
kind of
wish I was a
the
one hit
whole.
wonder. That would be amazing.
Right, I wish I was just a wonder, man, or half hit wonder. I don't know. We'll see. But I want to be a
I
one
just
hit.
wish somebody thought I was worth hitting. I'm kidding.
Right, right. But I want to actually ask you a history question, right?
Okay.
So, on our little silly discourse back and forth, the word elite gets thrown around or aristocratic. We got your right wing aristocrats and new art
Right.
aristocrats and all hobbit aristocrats like me. Do you think that does the United States, does America, North America, the America, the Anglo America, have we ever had aristocrats? Has there ever been American aristocrats?
If we have, I'm just going to go with my gut answer. If we have, it's been the business magnates,
Right.
Carnegie, Rockefeller, right? These days it would be Bezos or Musk. And I'm not making judgment calls on any of these guys, right? I'm just saying, especially Carnegie's probably the best example because he made a ton of money, right?
Right.
And he poured it all back into libraries. I mean, what's more aristocratic than that, right?
Right, absolutely, right.
I'm going to provide, I'm going to make my fortune. I mean, that guy got stuff done, right? And I'm going to pour it back into the community. I mean, holy smokes. I'm going to take care of my people. That's the aristocratic impulse, shouldn't it?
Right,
I'm
absolutely.
ruling, I have my place, but I have responsibilities, right?
And
And he took it very seriously.
I
So there
mean,
you go. In my mind, that's if America has aristocrats, it's the business magnates, those huge names that
right.
do
The
that
late
stuff.
late
That
19th century, early 20th century.
I would say even into the 20th century. Um, I've got Ford, obviously huge name.
Hughes, right?
Yeah, Hughes is a great example. The guys
Uh,
that start all the big companies.
Wrigley.
Wrigley, yeah,
I think he owned a bunch of newspapers, and I know
yeah.
he owned a big chunk of Catalina Island where I used to live.
Probably inventors too. Um, Edison, only because he was able to monetize, to use the fancy 21st century phrase. He was smart enough to make money from it. So Edison's in there. Other inventors. I would even argue some scientists are probably American aristocracy.
Right,
I mean, Albert Einstein, shorthand for smart guy.
right.
And I'll claim Einstein. I know he wasn't born in the United States, but he was naturalized and, did a huge part of his life, huge part of his work here in the United States.
Right.
So it's going to be people like that.
So
Or
we're
like Marilyn
talking,
Monroe, for example, cultural
right?
icons.
We're talking about, the American aristocrat is fundamentally a bourgeois aristocrat. It's not a true aristocrat, but a bourgeois aristocrat, usually
Yeah, no, we don't
self-made.
have Yeah, we don't have quote unquote true aristocrat. This is America, baby. Like you got to
Right.
make it.
I
You
mean,
got to work.
I think the closest traditional European aristocrats in the United States would be some of the southern plantation owners in the pre-Civil War, the guys
Yeah,
around Charleston and that kind of stuff, who
they
were
could have
often
been. They could have been.
they're often descendants of British
Yeah.
aristocrats
Had
and
that war gone
landowners.
differently, they could have been.
Right.
I think it's
That
probably a fair
definitely could have
answer.
you could have had a more traditional
Yeah.
19th century aristocracy
Yeah.
in the United States. But you're right, the barons of industry are what's considered now, you know,
Here's one thought I'm going to throw out there because of the West. The West is the story of the conquering of the West. That is a huge part of the American mythos. Kochmarov is going to love this answer, but what about outlaws?
well, outlaws
Billy the
are
Kid,
right.
guys like that.
I wouldn't
Like,
say they're
what do you think?
aristocrats. Almost every every people have something like Billy the Kid, like the cowboys in the United
Anti-hero.
States. In Eastern Europe, we have
Mm,
a type of character called the Hajduk, right?
okay.
Or Hajduk, if you like, and
Yeah, tell me about it. Tell me about it. I don't know anything about this.
It's an Eastern European thing. Uh, Romanian, Serb, Croat, also Greek, and they're
Okay.
basically peasant landowners or kind of like the bourgeois class. Usually that's where they come from, and they're usually partisans, and they're either fighting the Ottomans or local corrupt nobility. They're very like Robin Hood figures,
Yeah, Robin
and
Hood. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
they're basically like if you look it up, you'll see pictures of these guys with these crazy mustaches, and they're always from like rural areas, like in the middle of the
Rural
Carpathian
Bandits,
Mountains,
my favorite.
and they're kind of like bandits slash freedom fighters. And they're all, some of them are real people, like they actually existed, and they're very much Zorro. Zorro would be a
Mm,
good like kind of example of them.
yeah.
And there's a whole theme of around these kind of people in the Eastern Europe that's very similar to the American West, and I think that's kind of why if you meet a lot of Eastern Europeans from like my dad's generation is they love Westerns in Eastern Europe.
Ah,
At least
yeah,
in
okay. It's
Romania,
the same kind of anti-hero
right.
outlaw vibe.
Like they love that whole criminal vibe, that
Criminal
whole
hero.
right. Like Charles Bronson was my dad's favorite like actor.
There you
Um,
go.
that whole thing of like a dude fighting like the system, kind of like the greater man,
Right.
and sometimes being very like dark and masculine and violent. That's a very thing that really resonates with
What
Eastern
about
Europeans.
what about Clint Eastwood? Of
Oh, everybody loves Clint Eastwood.
course.
Like how
The
could
man
you
with no
not?
name. The man with no name.
Right. Um, but yeah, I think I mean, fuck, we can talk about the West forever. The West is one of the most interesting things. I'm scribbled down a note. Talk about the West. I lived in the
Talk about the
West, right?
West. There you go.
I've been all over the West, and I do love me some deserts and cactuses.
Uh,
So that's very West.
yeah, we want if that would fit into with the theme of this podcast, such as it is like where do we come from and what is the moment?
Right.
What's going on right now? What is it that we need
I mean, we can talk about Blood
moving
Meridian.
into yeah, whatever the 21st century is going to be.
Right. So, I mean, I think that's interesting. You're right about the nobility, about the aristocracy, right? So, one
Yeah.
thing that makes me think about that, and you actually kind of like touched on already, you talked about Carnegie and how he gave so much money back into the community.
Oh yeah, he wanted to give it all away if I remember. That was
Right.
the myth anyway.
Our current aristocracy, the technocrats
Oh,
are
okay.
nerds from the West Coast. What are these guys doing? They have no noblesse oblige. Okay, the nearest one out of all of
Define
them
that for the crowd, would you? That's
noblesse
my egalitarian impulse coming out.
noblesse oblige is the idea that the nobility has a responsibility and obligation to their peasants and their middle class, non
Perfect.
aristocrats, right?
Yes, they have responsibility.
Right. And that is the definition of the late 20th, 21st century failure of our upper class, if we even have an upper class, because the keyword is class, and some of these guys are have a complete lack of class, right? It's not about money. You can be a guy that hustles for money and multi-maxes all your business deals and stuff, and you can still be low class, right? Because you are born into a certain class. You know what I mean?
Isn't that Donald Trump in a way?
Well, well, ultimately,
I mean,
Donald
well,
Trump will
yeah.
never be an aristocrat.
No,
Right?
I
That's
don't
what
think he'd
it
want to
comes
be.
down to. He doesn't fit into that. He's lower
Yeah.
class. He's lower class coded,
Oh
you
yeah,
know.
100%.
But I mean, some of the what is considered aristocrats, like the Bushes, specifically tried
Right.
to lower
Yeah.
class code themselves.
Well, they're trying to be like they're also trying to be upper class. They're LARPing
Right.
American aristocracy. Like if a guy like Carnegie's the real deal, George Bush and George W. Bush are, like that they really, really, really want to pretend that they are, but history's going to look back and be like,
Right.
no,
Maybe they're
knuckleheads the
maybe
whole
they're
way down.
maybe their grandfather Prescott Bush,
Yeah,
because they go way back. But
yeah.
yeah, I mean, these guys LARP
You're the
as
guys. You're the guys that put the empire on the road to ruin. You don't get
right,
remembered. You don't get
right.
remembered
But
fondly.
it's interesting because we can have a complete lack of like noblesse oblige from the upper classes, like, and maybe Elon Musk might be the closest thing,
Well, only because of his goals.
only because of his goals. He
The
has,
ultimate goal.
and like I said, some of his transhumanist goals, I'm not a huge fan of,
Sure.
and I think Teslas are ugly, but at least he's doing something,
Right.
you know. At least he's doing something, and then you have the other billionaires like the Jeff Bezos and stuff. What are they doing? They're just nothing. There's no equivalent of Carnegie in that entire,
I wanna
market.
I wanna pip a Substack I really like.
Mhm.
Um, and it's related to what we're talking about here. But M.E. Rothwell, I'm sure you've seen that guy around,
I
right?
have, yeah.
Yeah. So I want to make sure that I say it correctly. But his Substack is called Cosmographia. So it's M.E. Rothwell, Rothwell. He wrote a article this week called "All Hail the Cloud,"
Oh,
and
I
I
saw
strongly
that. I didn't
recommend.
get a chance to read it
Yes,
yet.
listen, I strongly recommend everybody read this because number one, it's just it's a good example of this guy, right? It's a good example of this guy's writing. He's kind of a world traveler, sort of aristocratic vibe going on. Very knowledgeable man, and he does the thing I like about his Substack is that he approaches it like an old school cartographer, like an old school geographer. This is the kind of stuff that like you just don't see people doing anymore. I don't think the what he's trying to do, but he basically talks about how the cloud, which in internet parlance is the series of tubes, it's the internet, right? Everything gets uploaded to the cloud, which is kept on servers and all this. And he basically makes this argument that we've gone back to the one true God before all of the Abrahamic religions and all of the, pantheist or polytheistic religions of the East and so on and so forth, back to the fundamental, blood for the blood God stuff, right?
Right.
And it's the cloud. Everything gets uploaded to the cloud, and all we do is serve the cloud. Here's my banking information. Here's my pictures. Here's my videos. Here's my entire existence. Everything just up to the cloud.
Right.
And he makes a
I
really great point about all of this. And I think it relates back to what you're talking about there. What have these guys made? What have these guys created? I made a joke, but I think it applies. What did these guys give us? A death god,
right. A techno demon
a
that
techno
sucks
death
our
god, and just
yeah,
pour all of ourselves into this giant hole.
and it's emotionally draining. It
Yeah.
feeds on negativity, and it feeds on, you know, conflict and your time.
You
It's
go
like
to
a
you go to Machu Picchu, right? Up in the mountains of the Andes Mountains in South America, and it's this ruin of an Incan city at the height of their civilization, right? Insane. People are going to be standing there with their phones recording it to make a video they will never look at again. Seriously?
it's disgusting. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm not saying you shouldn't
That's
take a picture,
yeah,
but
pictures are fine, but
come on, man.
even then, dude, I hate pictures. I don't take pictures because I know I'm not going to look at them.
You know what? I'm the
So I don't
same.
bother. I might as
I
well
hate
just
I
put it in my
hate taking
head.
pictures. My wife's a photographer though. She's a professional photographer and she does art
Well,
and
you've outsourced it. I'm
yeah,
just kidding.
she's got hundreds of thousands, like $100,000 worth of like camera equipment. That's
Yeah.
how that's how she
Well,
makes
I
her.
mean, she's going to take incredible pictures, so just let the
Right.
professional handle it.
So I let her take all the pictures, okay? But you know what though? I could
Tough
take her
life.
most
Just
expensive
kidding.
camera with her most expensive lens, and my picture will look like ass. And she
Yeah.
can take the cheapest camera. Is that
Well,
me?
it's art. It's artistic.
Is that me beeping or you?
I hear no beeping.
It might be like a Telegram thing I have open or something. Let me close this annoying thing.
Okay. Beep beep
Stop.
beep beep beep.
It's
That's me.
giving me a whatever. I don't give a shit. Okay. But yeah, like I feel you. Like, come on. What? Yeah, it is Telegram. Damn Telegram. Go away.
Gone.
Quit. Okay. Sorry, guys. I'm computer inept sometimes because I just don't like learning. You know what? Now that you brought up the gods thing, the pagan thing, it's interesting
Yes.
because I wanted to bring something up and I took some notes here. So obviously, the last week we've had this whole annoying Christian versus pagan versus atheist
Right.
conversation, right?
Yes.
Which really fucking irritates me because it's all fake once again, right? And what I mean by it's all fake is that it's not real, right?
Nothing is happening.
Like we're not going to have a pagan revival
No.
that looks anything. I mean, we are having a pagan revival, right? But it looks nothing like the silliness that these guys are into pagan stuff are talking about.
Right.
Uh,
As if they could even be pagan.
right. I mean, there is a pagan revival that, they just worship, crystals and, the internet, and we give our
Right.
souls to techno demons on the web.
Right.
And then on the Christian side, we're never going to have a theocracy, okay? It's just not going to happen. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And I have a
No.
feeling that
The
when,
Byzantine Empire is not going to make itself
right,
manifest in the United States
right,
of America. That's
as
not
much as some
happening.
of us would like it, it's never going to happen.
That's why I brought it
And
up.
if it does happen,
Constantinople's gone, man. Just move on.
right. I
Okay,
mean,
just deal with
we
it and
can
move on.
take it back, right? Um,
I
if you
suppose
want
that
it.
you know what, actually, taking Constantinople back is more likely than a theocracy in America.
Right, absolutely. But nobody's going to want it back because it's filled with Turks.
Wow.
Sorry,
Okay.
Turks.
I've never met a Turk I didn't like, for the record. So I'm
So
just gonna throw that out there.
I'm Romanian. We tend to hate each other.
Oh, that's right. I forget. You guys have all that
I've
bad
actually
blood.
I don't think I've ever met a Turk, so I don't have.
Actually, no. You must have missed this joke earlier, but we were talking about Constantine the 11th, and I was like, "Let's do this Basil the Second stuff." And I'm like, "Sorry, Alexandru, because he was. If you don't know, he was known. If people at home don't know, also, he was known as the Bulgar Slayer. So sorry about that, bro.
But I'm not Bulgar.
Oh,
I'm a,
that's right. See,
I'm a
my
Romanian.
ignorance, my ignorance.
I'm north of them, but nonetheless, right? This whole pagan thing is stupid. Okay,
It's all big. I think it's stupid.
it's all stupid, and the
It's as
whole
dumb
like
as Fisto's understanding of Balkan
right,
intricacies.
right. It's completely silly, right? And what really irritates me, okay, and I am not a hardcore, oh my God, the Orthodox Church is going to rise upon all sides of the world and take over. It's just not going to happen. If I had to, if I had to put my money on something, and listen, I am a true believer, right? Not a very good one, but I am still one. I would bet that when the end of the world comes, when the final, the Armageddon comes, right?
Yeah.
I think that there might be just two Christians left. I think that might be the church, and that's okay,
Yeah.
right? Because it's not the end, the world's not going to end with a bunch of us around. It's going to end when we're at our lowest in some basement somewhere, dying of radiation poisoning, all right, or something like that. Or shit, I think it's almost arrogant of us to even believe that the world is going to end with humans on Earth,
Right.
right? In
Yeah.
the
Actually, I
vast,
think that's a good point. I mean, one of the silliest things that I think people believe is that they happen to be alive at the time when the world is going to end, when
right?
Armageddon is going to. No, come on. Everybody thinks that.
Yeah, every single generation throughout
Every
all
generation,
history
there's some
has it was
cult
always
on.
the end of the world tomorrow.
Right.
Millenarium cults have existed since the beginning of,
Y2K, baby.
right.
Y2K.
Every
That
year,
didn't do anything.
doomsday cults have been a
Yeah.
part of humanity since the very
Right.
beginning of humanity. I
Yeah.
think probably like, the early agrarian farmers were talking about how, I mean, the flood mythology, all that stuff is
Yeah.
goes back to the beginning
Doomsday
of time.
is Doomsday is also worn out and done.
Right. But the one thing that kind of gets to me, and this is my challenge to these pagans, right? These pagan guys. Every time there's any type of conversation between pagans and Christians, you get this guy, and it's usually some dude with like some Greek statue or a Roman statue, right? That's obviously whitewashed because the Greek statues were not freaking white marble. They're painted, right? They're never restored. They're just like,
Yeah.
and you get this guy, and he says something like, "Oh, you Christ cuck. What do you mean, the religion of your ancestors? The religion of that's Christianity, some Jewish, blah, blah, blah," right? And you're just like, shut the fuck up, dude, right? But I thought about that, like the religion of my ancestors, all right? So let me break this fucking shit down for you guys if you want to come and comment that crap on my fucking Substack, right? So I was born in Bucharest, Romania, right? I am basically, you know, three-fourths Romanian, one-fourth Russian. My dad was a half Russian, right? So if you look back, right, to all like, written history, known history, right?
Hmm.
Romania, which is Dacia Traiana in the Roman Empire era, right?
Right. Oh yes.
Trojan
Trajan.
Trajan's Dacia, right?
Yeah. Yep. The
Or
greatest
or
expanse of Roman territory.
right, also known as Scythia Minor, the whole
Yes.
area
Hmm.
was supposedly, according to tradition, right, Christianized by Saint Andrew sometime in the second century, right, or early first century. So that's when Christianity supposedly got to the what we consider the area of Romania today, right? Now, archaeologically speaking, there are basically artifacts, crosses, different like circular crosses, inscriptions in Latin that are Christian inscriptions that date back to the third century.
Hmm.
Right, that is a long fucking time.
That's a long
Right,
time.
that is
Yeah.
a long time. Right now, on my Russian side, and we'll say Russian side, and I will post my goddamn fucking DNA results, right? Because I did do the DNA test, and I am basically Western Slavic, so I'm like basically a white Russian from the Western Ukrainian kind of Finnish border, like St. Petersburg area, and a Romanian, 100%. It's like 98%, and then the other 2% is like Greek and that type of shit,
That's Greek
right?
in there. I
Right.
have a funny story about ancestry, by the way, but before that's over.
Right. I want to hear it too. But anyways,
Yeah. Yeah.
so the Russians, right, were Christianized according to the Russian Orthodox Church, also by Saint Andrew, right? Which is obviously a debatable thing, both of those options, right? The Russian Orthodox view is that when Hippolytus or whatever, the historian in the third century, referred to Scythia, he meant Scythia as in the Crimea, not Scythia Minor as in, Romania, Bulgaria, Serbia. But that's both debatable. There's more artifacts of early Christianity in Dacia Minor than there was in Crimea, right? Either
Hmm.
way, 100% without a doubt, right? The Russians, the Kievan Rus out of Kiev, were Christianized in the ninth century, so about 800, right? And they fully converted. They struck down their pagan gods and everything. So we're still talking about over 1,000 something years,
Right.
give or take, right? Let's assume that there's 4 generations per century,
Yeah.
right? That is 450 fucking generations of my family was Christian.
Yeah.
What do you
That
mean,
is the
my
old ways.
ancestors? How
That is the old
far?
ways.
Like, I
Right.
honestly don't know anybody beyond my great grandfather. Right? I don't really have any records of anybody past the 19th century. Right?
Right.
Um, so 450 assumed generations of Christians, but I'm supposed to what? Worship Zalmoxis, the chthonic, cave god?
That's made up.
right? It's not made up. Zalmoxis is real, right? Zalmoxis is real. It's what the Dacians worshipped. And what they used to do is they used to make pits with spears in them, right? And that's how they used to fortune tell. They used to throw a motherfucker into the pit of
Nice.
spears. And if he died quickly, Zalmoxis smiled upon you. If he died
Nice.
a horrendous, miserable death, shit was going to be bad. And that was how they fortune told.
Maybe bring
Maybe
just that part back, but leave everything the same.
right. So, you know what? I'm sorry that I am not eager to throw my child into the pit of spears
To
for
find out if it's a good
Zalmoxis.
person or not. Yeah, right.
All right. So, I mean, the whole thing is ridiculous, right? Like, who are your ancestors if not the last 450 generations?
Right. Yes.
Right?
This is something that I'd like to tell my funny story real quick.
Go for it.
And then I want to zoom out to something that I've been thinking about a lot, but your whole rant expresses something that I've been trying to think about very, very well. So first, the funny story. So, with my own ancestry, I've never done one of those DNA test things, and I don't think I ever will because, and this is probably going to trigger some people. I honestly just don't give a shit. I don't care because I have the genealogies of my father's line going all the way back to when they got off the boat in 1638. All right, that's pretty cool. Okay, that's good. That part's good enough for me. My mom's side of the family, I'm still working on. It's a little bit tougher because I think probably because, and this might trigger some people too, because they were Irish. They didn't write nearly as many things down as my Protestant Pilgrim English forefathers did. My mom's side of the family, they came over during the famine. I've got some information that I can track down, but I really have a lot of work to do on that side of it. Regardless, English, Irish, good enough for me. However, there's one really funny family story in there. I have, according to my father, according to family legend, I have a little bit of Native American back there because I want to say it was like a great grandmother, great grandfather, something like that, like back in that area. Gramps was having some problems getting it done. Okay. I'll just be blunt.
All right.
Grandpa was having some trouble getting it done. So grandma, went and got some help from a nice local gentleman, so to speak. So that's where that little bit of Native American comes from. Just need a little help getting a family started. And apparently he was happy to oblige. So they did. They did something properly degenerate. And here we are. No, I'm teasing, but
Right.
that's the story. So I got a little Native American back there. I better go get my money,
You,
right?
you know what? You better your
Better.
point two,
1/64th
your
something of a
your
mile.
0.01%. I'm actually
Whatever
curious.
it's yeah,
Like,
right. Hey, if you'll pay for the DNA test. No, I'm just kidding.
you know what? There's all the conspiracy theories that
Let's
like,
crowdsource it on Substack. That'll be funny.
right. You know what? That's what they should do. Instead of like these guys, these purity spiraling right wingers, they're going to be like, instead of post physique, it's post DNA,
Post DNA.
post DNA,
Post your
bro.
DNA. We'll
Show
start
off your
we'll start a Substack where like we take donations to like run DNA tests on these people.
right. We're
Be
like,
like,
oh, you're
if you're going to talk
10%
about ancestry,
Ashkenazi.
if you're
You're
going to talk about
done.
race, if you're going to talk about ethnicity, if you're going to talk about any of this stuff, we're going to find out exactly what you are. And then
Right, because I get these guys over here arguing with me about like European history, and they're like Indian, and it's like, I mean, that's cool
right.
and all, bro, but shut the fuck up.
Well, it's that old joke. No one on the internet knows you're not a dog,
Right.
or knows that you're a dog. And that gets into like I said, I wanted to zoom out, right? And we can
Hmm.
take this a couple of different ways. I'm going to leave it up to you, depending on how much spice you want to try to get or how bored you are with the discourse.
All right, go for it.
But history, and this is why I wanted to zoom out with your particular story in people's minds. History is used as a cudgel to prove whatever point someone wants to be making. And for a lot of people, especially I think on Substack and kind of among the folks who look at the stuff that we do, right? Our little Shire Stack nerddom, the nerd stuff everybody talks about on the internet. People are going to know, okay, well, yeah, obviously there. But for a lot of people, they don't realize that. And when you pause and be like, guys, listen, history, you heard about propaganda, you've heard about history, you've heard about how, winners write the history books and things of that nature. That's all very true. But when people start invoking history to make a point, to make a thesis, to try to persuade you, you've really got to pause because especially these days, we have a whole couple generations of kids that grew up, at least in America, under the whole No Child Left Behind thing and how
Right.
bad the education system has got. Guys, history is one of the things that nobody gets taught anymore. I made a joke. Somebody was like, "Oh, they just got to drop in there and read this epic," and I'm like, my kids would all go, "What's a Greek?"
Right.
And you want them to just start reading literally anything. You've got to
It's just
prepare the
not going to
ground.
happen.
You've got to, more people need to understand how bad it is. And then more importantly, they need to pause and understand how much work needs to be done to fix it and to prepare the ground. It doesn't take a lot, but I find it's more than what most people are willing to do because nobody really wants to work. Nobody really wants to try to fix it. Nobody has the patience to, or so few have the patience to listen to the dumb questions, to listen to the silly explanations, and to realize, it's not what the question is. It's not what the person's actually trying to tell me. It's the fact that they're asking it all and taking that and turning that into something bigger, to set a fire, to get the flame going. It takes a lot of work. It takes more. It doesn't take as much as most people think, but it takes a lot more than a lot of people are willing to put forth. And especially these days with propaganda and history and, like all the guys arguing at you. We could talk about this in detail if you want. I really don't want to make it seem like I'm trying to shit on this guy. I'm really not trying to. But there
Right.
was an article amongst the DR, the dissident right, that invoked the Spanish Civil War. And the
Hmm.
author, should I say who it is or should we just leave it?
Yeah, I mean, listen, if you're putting stuff out,
All right,
it's public.
we're going for it. I want to try to be a nice guy because I do honestly think this is a bright guy. But my God, you need to hit the books, brother.
Right.
Shut the hell
And
up
you
and
know
hit the
what?
books.
Let's throw a note here. Listen, we can be a jerk sometimes. We can
Oh, absolutely.
everything. Listen, if you we're going to be operating under man rules on this podcast, okay? Fucking man rules, all right? If you vomit your shit out in the public domain on Substack,
Here it goes.
I'm allowed to talk about it, all right?
Absolutely.
If I think your shit's fucking stupid, do not get ass mad that I think your shit's stupid, all right?
My
Come at me and tell me, why I'm wrong. Two, if you think my shit's stupid, you
Yeah.
can go ahead and critique all my stuff all you want.
Yeah,
And I
absolutely.
will not get ass mad because I'm probably better than you no matter what. I'm definitely prettier than all of you guys.
Can
And I'm
confirm. Can
I'm
confirm.
elite human capital here. I have a blow up water slide in my backyard, okay?
Hey,
I'm basically an aristocrat of the
I got
Shire.
I got a face for radio. All right.
All
Don't
right.
worry about it. But
So, yeah, go
my
for
point
it.
in saying that is 100% man rules. I just don't, there's beating the dead horse when it comes to the discourse. So don't look
Right.
at this as critiquing the dissident right per se, or even critiquing any of that stuff, or even participating in that conversation. I'm simply using this as an example of how dangerous a little bit of knowledge in history can be.
Right.
So, shall I just go ahead and kind of provide the basics here?
Yeah, let's go.
All
Let's
right.
talk about it.
So this is called Building Bridges Part One. It's by a guy named Fortissax, and his Substack is Fortissax. Fortissax is typing. Apologies if I've pronounced that incorrectly. Now, you can find this on his Substack, and I'm going to skip to where it gets good because people's time is valuable. But in the fourth paragraph, this is where it starts going off the edge, and I'll explain why it's related to Spain in a moment and why I'm starting here. But it says, in this series to come, my intention is to lay out the differences of the dissident right and propose solutions. We are fast approaching the darkest hour. So I underscored that. I underlined that in red pen, and I wrote next to it, lol, no. The reason is later on in the article, he invokes the example of Spain and the Spanish Civil War, and he tries to use Franco as an example. Francisco Franco, generally known as Francisco Franco, the mythic leader of the nationalists, tries to invoke him as an example of unity and why we need to come together. Now is the time to come together in unity. So here's why I wrote under darkest hour, LOL, no. He goes on to explain pretty well some of the things that we're facing. Economic crisis. Only problem is that hasn't happened yet. Things are still running, right? Environmental degradation. Yeah, we have problems, but those things haven't really happened yet either. Demographic shifts. Kind of happening, sure. Lots of migration, a lot of moving around, a lot of immigration. Spicy topic at the moment. Okay, so fine, sure. Geopolitical conflicts. Okay, those are happening. Things are certainly a lot more spicy than they have been at any time. What with a near peer war between Russia and Ukraine, the stuff with Taiwan, the stuff with Israel. Okay, I'll
Right.
give you that. Partly driven by resource scarcity is one thing he says. I kind of question that a little bit. Uh, Partly by strategic maneuvers of global powers. Okay, sure, fine. Next thing, technological and social changes. Pace of technological change and its potential to disrupt social structures and employment. That's probably the best that he gets right there. Because the
Right.
thing is, okay, to say that we are approaching the darkest hour to provide one, two, three, four, five different subjects and score about a 1.5 out of 5, then compare it to Spain. That's where this all goes off the rails immediately. Because Spain, if listeners at home are unaware, the Spanish Civil War that erupted in July of 1936, you could make the argument was a long time coming from Philip II in
Right.
the 16th century with the Spanish Armada. I mean, the Spanish Empire had undergone this incredible decline over centuries. Whatever you think of the West, whatever you think of America, wherever you think things are going, we are in no way similar to Spain in this regard. The
Not
darkest hour is far away from here.
right. And
I
you
have one
have
question, but I want you to talk. Yeah.
right. You have. I mean, okay. For and what Fisto means here is when you think of the Spanish, right? The Spanish Civil War took place in modern Spain, right?
Yes. Or what
But
was becoming modern
what
Spain.
was
But
becoming
yes.
modern Spain,
Yes.
but it started, you know, with Isabella and Ferdinand,
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah.
Because the decline, the decadence of the Spanish Empire,
Oh my
which
goodness.
spanned the entirety of the Americas, except with the exception of Canada and uh, northeastern America. But you remember,
We live in territory they claimed.
right, Florida,
Yeah.
California, Arizona,
Yeah.
Texas was all part of the Spanish Empire. The
Yes.
Philippines, right? The Philippines was part of the Spanish Empire.
Yes. I want to pause on that for a moment. Do you know what the disaster of 1898 was?
In Spain, or
Just
I don't
what
actually.
was it?
Just
What was it?
I'm not sure. I don't.
That question right there illustrates probably the best I can imagine my ultimate issue with this article. Dude, that was the Spanish American War. That's what the Spaniards call it.
Right.
So you
Okay.
want to talk about the darkest hour and you don't know what the disaster of 1898 is? You
Right.
don't even mention that?
When they lost basically
Yeah,
all their colonies.
they lost their overseas empire. The overseas empire was done. All they had left was Morocco. You'll like this part. The disaster of 1898 led to the silver age of Spanish literature. There were literally 3 generations of writers that spent decades trying to figure out what does it mean to be Spanish? What does it even does that even matter? Right?
Right.
So the darkest no, we are so far from that. We are so far from that. I mean, yes, things are a little whoa, but you don't have people working starvation wages on the Latifundias. You don't have anarchist rebellions. And I don't mean Antifa LARPing.
Right.
I mean legitimate militias in the street gunning down priests as
And
a matter of policy.
digging up dead nuns and
Dude,
hanging
you
their
know,
corpses.
you know what I learned? And here's the funny thing. Like I'm going, all of my critiques on this article are literally, I did it just off the top of my head to prove a point,
Right.
right? That this is just pulling from my memory. I've already learned more reading 30 pages of this book. You know, that revolutionary violence I mentioned. Do you know what CNT called it?
No.
Dude, revolutionary gymnastics.
Okay.
They rebelled constantly as a matter of policy to train the polity for when the big one came, so no one would be afraid.
Right.
Yeah,
No,
yeah. Tell me more. Tell me more how we're at the darkest hour.
right. And you don't even have to, I mean, the darkest, those, what you're talking about was darkness in the 20th century and the 19th century.
Oh, I
And
know.
if you really want to get crazy, you can even go to, pre-modern medieval
Right.
Spain, and or
The Dark Ages.
early Dark Ages Spain, and the whole entire the whole entire island peninsula was conquered by Muslims, right?
Right.
That whole
That,
thing, the Reconquista, the whole thing, that was pretty
yeah, yeah.
dark.
You know what I learned today? The Reconquista. Shoot, who was it? One of the major leaders of the Spanish Catholic Party, FIDA. Basically, it was the Catholic Party in Spain. Which another thing, this essay doesn't bring up CETA at all. It doesn't bring up the Catholic Church at all.
Just talks about phalangist.
Kind of. I'll get to that in a moment. But the I think I'll have to go back in the book and check. But there was a major speech. There was when CETA won that election. It was either like to promote the elect. It was like either the beginning of the party or when they won the election. I don't remember. But they had this big event at the location where the mythic reconquest of Spain from the Muslims had begun. So you want to talk about bringing unity together under the nationalist cause, and you're not going to bring up the Catholic Church at all?
Right. The Red
Hey,
Cats.
Do you know who put Franco in charge as what was it? It was like General Chief of Staff or something. The Catholic government.
Right.
Like you see what I'm saying?
Right. Absolutely. We're using the aesthetics
Yes.
instead of the actual history.
Yeah.
We're using the aesthetics, and that's kind of what a lot of the stuff on the internet is. It's like, let's talk about the aesthetics in the same way, like a lot of Catholics use the whole Crusades thing as, the Holy War, when in reality, yes, there might have been some Holy War elements to it, but a lot of those knights just wanted gold. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Of
And
course.
the Venetians
Gold and
who were
adventure.
right, the
Hey,
Venetians
why'd you
who
join the
were
military? What'd you tell me? You wanted adventure, right?
right. Give me that silver.
There you go. Yeah, give me that silver, baby.
A lot of these the Venetians who were ferrying the Crusaders across the Mediterranean to Jerusalem were also selling weapons to the Muslims at the same time.
Right.
And then they would turn around and pray in churches. And then the Venetians had no problem allowing, the Turks to conquer Constantinople. Not one fucking Western Christian lifted a finger to go help Constantinople and, the fall of the empire,
Yeah.
because you know what? It benefited them not to have a powerful, Eastern Christian empire on their eastern flank. So
Yep.
there's always the oversimplification,
It's that
simplicity,
oversimplification. Yes, it's that
simplification.
oversimplification that I want to attack.
Right. A cool side note I just thought, right, about the Reconquista and the connection between the Americas in San Diego, right? And
Mm-hmm.
there's a huge park in the middle of San Diego, and it's beautiful, like Central Park type park. What the hell's it called? I forgot what it's called, right? But I live right next to it. And there's a convention center area with a bunch of museums, and they have a statue of El Cid in the middle of it.
Nice.
Right.
That's
So
cool.
it's like El Cid on a
In
horse.
San Diego, of course.
In
Which was
San
part of the
Diego,
Spanish
right?
Empire. I mean,
And you
that's
get a lot of
cool.
Spanish stuff in San Diego. I don't think the statue is actually a Spanish or Mexican statue. I think it was brought there it's like a copy, or it was made for one of the world fairs. But I always thought it was cool that there's this statue of El Cid, and nobody knows what the fuck it is. Everybody that goes there has no idea who he is unless you're a history nerd. And I was always like, El Cid.
I recognize the name, but I don't know what he's famous for.
He's
But
the
I do know that
hammer.
a
He's the
famous
hammer.
general.
He's
El
basically
Cid.
the guy that led the Reconquista. He led a bunch of battles, and he defeated a
Yeah.
lot of the Muslims in the
The
Reconquista.
stuff.
And El Cid stands for like the hammer, if I'm translating my Spanish correctly. But yeah, dude, oversimplification of stuff. Everything is simplified, and it's simplified to portray kind of a doom and gloom. And we talked about this last week. I don't buy the whole Weimar America
No.
thing.
No.
It's nothing like that. Okay,
No, not
it
really.
is not like that. And I'm not saying that there's too much doom and gloom. Listen, things aren't going to be as horrible as the Black Plague. All right. We had a world plague 2 years ago, and it was ultimately fake and gay.
Yeah, it was
All right.
not as advertised.
I don't even
100%.
think we can do a world war properly anymore.
Probably not.
It'll
Probably. I mean,
probably be it'll probably be like
because hey,
drones blowing up drones, and
yeah,
it'll be like
yeah.
lame as hell, and I'm gonna like nobody's gonna even know what's happening, you
Look,
know?
the single biggest reason that draft should be conscription should be resisted these days is you are literally just a target for a murder bot.
Right,
Join the army, become a murder bot target. Cool.
right,
Just hang around and wait for a Russian to drop a grenade on you.
right.
Have a great
And
day.
look, man, like the ills of our age are not historical. They're honestly on a spiritual level. I know, atheists will scoff at me, but we are
This
dealing
one
with a
doesn't.
we are dealing with a spiritual
Yeah,
emptying, right now. That's what
a lack of
everything.
meaning.
And I was having, like I said, I was having this conversation with my, real life friends with my feet on the grass yesterday, and they were talking about, the trans issue and all this stuff. And I was like,
Hmm.
listen, I go, we're talking about fundamentally here, man. We're talking about symptoms of an illness,
Yes,
right?
symptoms.
It's
Yep.
symptoms of an illness. It wasn't like all of a sudden all this stuff popped up out of nowhere, suddenly in the 2000s. This is something, this is a boil, a tumor or a festering pustule, right? That started long time ago.
The listlessness, yeah, the listlessness of our society, just like Spain, has been brewing for a very long time.
Right?
And we
Decades.
are, yes, at minimum, I would argue it may even go back to the Industrial Revolution itself.
Right.
That a lot of what we're dealing with is just trying to come to terms with all of that.
Right.
One thing I want to do, I want to pull this back to the Spanish Civil War real quick.
Sure.
I don't feel like I really want to go over much of Fortissax essay, only just to illustrate one final thing. And this is my fundamental problem with the essay and with a lot of guys just online in general. And I mean, look, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. So I'm preaching to myself here. At the end of the day, what brings unity, what brings people together, it's not words, it's not essays, it's not arguing online. Let's talk about Francisco Franco for a moment, right? I said that he was the myth of Francisco Franco, right?
Right.
Here's where part of the myth comes from. The Spanish Civil War begins in 1936. It is a military coup launched by the government, right? Franco didn't launch that coup. That wasn't his thing. That wasn't his idea. He was in the Canary Islands at the time, which is, if folks don't know, if you look at Spain, go directly west and then down, it's off the coast of Africa. So he's off there in the Canary Islands because the government didn't want him in town, right? They're trying to
Right. Keep
prevent
them
him.
out.
So a dude from England flies down, picks Franco up, and flies him down into the south of Spain, down near Seville, I believe. Next thing that happens is the army of Morocco gets airlifted by the Germans into southern Spain. Now let's pause and think about this for a minute. The dissident right, not really big fans of Muslims, right? Race and ethnic, all that stuff's kind of a big deal to them. Would you agree?
Yeah, yeah.
Who do you think the army of Morocco was?
Right. Moroccans.
They were Moroccans. And for those of you keeping score at home, those are Muslims. Guess who blessed the efforts of that Muslim army? The Catholic Church in Spain. This is a fact, right? You see how complicated this gets immediately.
Right.
The Moroccan army is completely fine with killing Spaniards because they're on campaign. You see what I mean?
Right.
And this is the army that Franco commands. So you want to talk about unity? Why is he using a Muslim army to kill Spaniards? Right?
Right.
All of a sudden, instantly complex. Franco gets in charge of this whole thing because a couple of dudes die, and primarily because the military coup fails. That's what starts the Civil War. They launched a coup, it failed, time to slug it out. And this is the last bit that I want to throw out there. There's this event called the Alcazar of Toledo, where a nationalist, this is a very famous story. There's a nationalist group holed up in this Alcazar that's a Spanish fort, basically. And the Republicans are sieging this fort. And the commander, let's see if I can find the guy's name, Colonel Jose Moscardo Iarte. I apologize if I mispronounced that. He's the commander of the guard, and they kidnapped the guy's son. His son's like 16 years old or something. And there's a phone call that we have the transcript of where Luis and his father, Mr. Moscardo or Senor Moscardo, have a conversation. What's happening, my son? They say they're going to shoot me if you don't surrender. Then commend your soul to God, shout Viva España, Viva Cristo Rey, and die like a hero.
That's
Bro,
brutal.
a month later, his son's dead. If you look up pictures of the Alcazar, this thing gets blown to fucking
I have
pieces.
seen pictures. It's basically
Bro,
just rubble.
oh, it's savage. You know who the hero of Toledo is? Generalissimo Franco. He rolls in, lifts the siege, rescues Toledo. This phone call shot across the world, my man.
Right.
You want to talk about unity? This phone call, all of the nationalists, they hear this horrible story, and Franco's the hero. That's how you gain unity. You have to go do stuff.
Right.
And it's in situations that, and I'm not saying I would do much better, right? I could probably play the part of the son because he just has to hang out and get shot, right?
Right.
I could probably play that role pretty well. This is when people invoke history, they're poking powers, they're poking gods they do not understand.
Right.
That's the thing that just people want to know. Why, man, Fisto, why are you screaming and yelling all the time? Because you're like you were saying with your story earlier, you're throwing people into this pit of spikes. You have no idea what you're doing, right?
Right. Absolutely. You have no idea what you're doing. And
Yeah, you don't know what you're asking.
I think many, 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 many years ago when I was a little kid, I watched the movie All Quiet on the Western Front. Well, one of the many
Oh,
versions of All Quiet. And I think it was
perfect
one
story.
of the really old ones.
Yeah,
And I remember the gist of the story, but the one thing that is like seared into my mind that I can never like forget, I've never forgotten it, and I had to have been like 5 years old when I first saw this, was that scene where the main character, he's coming back from the front and he's in this like little German town, and these old fat guys sitting around a beer garden, and they're asking about like, oh, the nobility of battle and blah blah blah, and
right.
I'm just like, it just stuck with me. And that's what a lot of the discourse feels like. These
Yes,
people that
yes,
that when guys write stuff about, oh, I want to start a dueling, I'm like, did you talk like a kind of guy that's never been punched in the face?
right.
You know, you're basically Quentin Tarantino, who makes movies where the violence clearly shows the world that he's never been punched in the face because it's completely fake violence,
Yeah, yeah.
which is
Hollywood.
fine. But you
Yeah, it's
you're
Hollywood.
allowed that because you live in a fantasy world,
Right. It's clearly fantasy.
right?
No
And
one's
sometimes
pretending that
sometimes
stuff is
people,
real.
the line between LARP and fantasy has completely fallen apart in some people's
Well,
minds.
we're living in a virtual world now. It is real.
Exactly. It's
This is supposed
completely
to
a
mean it's real.
simulacra.
Yeah. Ooh, that's a good 10-cent
We'll,
word.
we'll go get into some Baudrillard later.
Yeah,
Hey,
man.
one thing you said really smart in one of the chats that kind of stuck in my mind was that, when you're comparing the army of Morocco, the Spanish army of Morocco, if we were having an equivalent of in the United
Oh,
States,
I
it'd be
wanted to
the
bring this up.
nationalist
Yes.
army of Mexico, right? Or,
Yes, that's
some
what it
Latin
would be.
American army.
Yeah. This is the funny thing. This is the funny thing. You've got all these guys talking about unity and you got all this stuff and all these things we're supposed to do. And it's like, a lot of people have said, well, the citizenry is probably not going to sign up for the draft. The army and the military can't meet quota. So a lot of people think they're going to tap into the immigrants. Well, all of a sudden, American Franco, if there's an American Franco, the name fits because he's going to be leading an army descended from a bunch of Spanish guys.
Right.
A 200,000 man army of northern Mexico, right? And those guys are going to roll in, the army of Morocco. I forget what battle it was. There was a battle in a town that they took. And this is in the documentary. Actually, I'm going to pimp this real quick. You know what? You should include a link to this because I'm sure some
To
people
the
are
the long documentary, the
yeah,
one that
yeah,
you can
yeah,
get
yeah,
on
yeah,
YouTube,
yeah.
right?
Yes, the long documentary on YouTube, and also a bunch of other things that I've got over at the Partisan that people can look at and find out about.
And we'll link that.
But that documentary talks about this battle very early, and the Nationalist Army rounds up 2,000 people, brings them down to the stadium, and shoots them all.
Right.
And a lot of the people do not realize, guys, when a war kicks off, this is the wisdom of Robert E. Lee. I mentioned this in chat somewhere else or on Substack, maybe. This is the wisdom of Robert E. Lee. It is good that war should be so horrible so we don't become so fond of it. Guys, you know what side you're going to be on when things kick off? Wherever you happen to be, that's going to
Right.
be your
Because you
side.
don't
And
want
a
to
lot,
die.
right? That's exactly it. What side are you going to join? Well, what zone am I in? Am I in the Republican zone or the nationalist zone?
Right.
And that's what happened. All these guys found themselves stuck in the nationalist zone. And there's this story in the documentary. A wife tells the story of her husband who comes back to town and he says, I've never wrote anything. I never said anything. I voted for the Republicans, but they're not going to hurt me. Yeah, guess whose corpse ended up in a stadium?
Right. And
That's
it's
it.
just
That's
how
how
it
the stuff.
is.
Yes.
Shit's harsh. All right.
Oh, yeah.
And we
Oh,
live in
my
a
God.
fantasy world. And, shit's harsh in the world right now,
Hmm.
all over the place. And we live
It
in a
is.
very privileged, to use a favorite term of the left, we are very privileged
We
and
do.
we should be
100%.
thankful for where we live. Okay.
The richest, fattest, happiest people in maybe not the happiest, but the richest and the fattest people in human
Right.
history by far.
We're doing
I have literal miracles at my fingertips that I
right.
use for
We're
entertainment.
doing schizo Substackistan combat while I'm sucking on my vape and pounding a
Yeah.
LaCroix, whatever the fuck it's called.
Yeah.
Beach plum flavor. It's actually really good.
Yeah.
Right. But
Another,
go
sorry,
for
go
it.
ahead.
No, you go
Oh,
ahead, man.
just another story too. Like I'm going to keep hammering this to talk about the Spanish Civil War and not bring up the importance of faith and not bring up the importance of the Catholic Church in creating unity. People aren't going to die because you wrote a clever vitalist article on Substack.
Right.
There's another interview. And I could talk about the Republican side too. This is the funny part. But on the nationalist side, there's a nun that they interview who tells the story of her brother. And she's a nun, right? So her brother comes to her and asks, this is very early in the war, comes to her and asks, if I've joined the army and fight for God and fight for Spain, will God remember me? Will God count me among the martyrs? So this is, imagine your sister, right? You're talking to your brother. This is real stuff. And what do you think she tells him?
What?
Yeah.
He was.
Yes. If you fight for Spain, you fight for God and he will remember you. So the brother goes with his sister's blessing and dies in combat. He dies. And the look on this woman's face, she's proud. She's carried this memory. She's carried his life for, when was this made? 1982, 1981.
A long time,
She's,
40.
she's carried this guy's, yeah, she's carried her brother's memory for 60 years. And
Yeah.
she looks just like it was the greatest thing he could have done. Like it's almost like she wished she could have been there with him. But yeah, tell me more about your vitalist essay, how that's going to get people moving and get things changed.
Right.
Sure.
And I
Yeah.
mean, the
Tell me about how
nearest thing,
banging chicks on bar stools or whatever is going to,
right? And
yeah,
then,
that's going to do it.
the nearest thing to an example of something like that today is, you see it in the Islamists that take their religion seriously.
They take it very seriously
They take it
for the most
exceptionally
part.
serious
Yeah.
for the most part, right?
Certainly more than we do. I remember one thing that you joked about how Islam is for the poors. Their ruling class is just as degenerate as ours.
Right.
That made me laugh.
Well, because I mean, it's true. If anybody's been to Dubai or
Yeah, oh yeah, my God, Dubai. Yeah, right.
it's just as degenerate as, even more so. I mean, it's a degenerate, like,
They give Washington a run for their money.
yeah, it's a mall, and I've been to
Yeah,
other
right.
Islamic countries. I've been to Malaysia, which
Yeah.
is technically an Islamic country. And it's wild, right? But I mean, yeah, these guys don't understand this because they're children. That's what it really comes down to. I mean, look at this guy. Like, look at this fucker on here, right? So
Yeah.
Dave Green posts this, his pagan article, which is pretty good. And you get this dweeb on here, right? Named John Exum.
Ah,
Oh, look, his icon, of course, it's either a Greek or Roman statue, because can't tell exactly. And he's like, he tells me, basically, he goes, you should probably go back to your own country and talk about it, though. We're sick of you and your weird foreign religions. Oh, so he's a Native American? What?
Wait, he's saying this to who? He's saying this
To
to
me, to
Green?
me,
Oh, to you.
right? So I should probably go back to my own country and talk about it over there, right? Criticize the pagans there because John Exum is sick of, me and my
Yeah.
weird foreign religions, right?
Yep.
Um,
You're gonna
so
pack up your family and head over right now. You're gonna
who the
sign off
fuck
the
are you,
podcast.
Sacagawea?
Yeah, right.
Right? Like, okay, cool, man. Right? Like,
You you know what I want to start doing is just being like, listen, my forefathers stepped off the John of London into Rowley, Massachusetts in 1638. Alexander can stay.
right. Oh, and look, it's funny.
Simply based on my aristocratic cognizance, right? My family's been longer here as long as anybody. As
Right.
long
So,
as anybody with my
so,
skin color.
so
So I get to
this
say whoever
guy,
stays.
yeah, this guy, he goes, so you think that makes you more legitimate, proxy Jews and their whataboutism and endlessly tedious, right?
What?
And then says that,
That's funny.
like, I can tell you that many of the early colonists would have been a lot more tolerant of Hinduism than they would have been of Catholicism, even though some of
What?
the founding fathers were Catholics. I live in
They'd also be
Savannah,
going,
right?
how, they'd also be going, hey, you made it all the way here from India? How the heck did you manage that? That's kind of impressive. Like they'd be like, whoa,
Right,
never
right.
mind.
But this guy goes, I live in Savannah right now. Oh, he lives in Savannah right now, which is 20 minutes from where I am, right?
Right.
And that's cool.
You
I
guys should
mean,
get a
there's
beer. That would be hilarious.
the downside,
I'll even
the
come up for that.
downtown of Savannah is basically in the shadow of one of the biggest Catholic churches in, the South. But that's cool, man, right? We're gonna go ahead and, ignore that giant fucking church there. Just these people are fucking clowns, man. Like it's like, oh, look, here we go. Of course, this dude was on fucking Walt Bismarck's podcast. I'm starting to feel like, oh, and he's a worshiper of Apollo.
What? That's my best friend's name. I should let him know. He's going to think that's very odd.
Is he a worshiper of Apollo?
Oh, my buddy. No, no, no. I think he's some variety of Christian.
Hmm. Anyways, so Mr. John Exum, the worshiper of the cult of Apollo, right?
That's
Who
funny.
grew up in the South in the evangelical church, but then moved to New York and converted to Orthodox Judaism and is now a anyway. Just fucking, this is not,
This
you know what I
is
mean?
this is another example of that joke I made the other day that the right and the left are looking a lot alike. We're like they're just adopting whatever, you know.
Just
This is
nonsense.
this is the right's version of pronouns.
Right. It is. It is. It is absolutely that. And you know what? What's funny?
It's
My
the same
wife,
picture.
my wife called it right because she said that when we were talking
The women
about,
always know before the men.
I
They,
know,
they always see.
they
They
have
honestly really do.
they do have great wisdom. Like sometimes
Oh
when
my
like my wife has
gosh.
no idea
Absolutely.
what the fuck I'm talking about 90% of the time, and then she says something that's like it has so much insight, and it's like, oh, you're fucking right, you know. Um,
Every time I make a joke about going outside and taking a walk and going to the forest, you know how I think of my mother telling me growing up, go outside and play, go outside and play,
right,
and I'm just like, God damn it, mom, you were right.
right.
Just
Everything they say
forget it.
is right in a way.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
we were talking about the whole trans thing, and I brought up the whole, what I said earlier, how like all this stuff is a symptom, and she
Right.
said something that was very accurate to, me reading Byung-Chul Ho the last few weeks, which was that she says that we have too much freedom and we have too much freedom of individuality to where we are living under the effects of stress of inventing ourselves,
Inventing stress. Yeah.
right?
I
Well,
remember seeing something about that elsewhere too, talking about how there's nothing to worry about, so we make up things to worry about. So we feel like, oh, okay, everything's normal because I do have things to worry about.
right.
It's like it's very strange.
Do you, okay, I'm gonna use a very geeky kind of like reference right now. So
Okay.
in role-playing games you make characters, right?
Sorry,
Like
say
in
that one more time.
like like in Dungeons and Dragons, those kind
Yes.
of role-playing games,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
you make characters in games like World of
Yes.
Warcraft and Baldur's Gate,
Sure.
and you make characters, right?
Yeah.
Well, there's kind of a thing called character paralysis where you're constantly inventing. You can't decide what character you want to play. So you're constantly making a new character, right? Well,
Yeah.
we live in a mass psychosis of that where
Yes.
We
It
are
makes sense.
all main characters in our own narrative because we are told that we're main characters from the very beginning of our lives.
Yeah.
And we are told that we have to make ourselves, we have to invent ourselves,
To put
which,
it another way, like growing, back when I was doing like my computer gaming phase, it was a lot of, Bethesda RPGs like Fallout and Skyrim, and that
right,
we're basically speedrunning Skyrim, and we can't decide what character we like the best.
right. And
That's it.
in
That
in
makes
the
sense.
past, your character was made for you because you were born in a class or in a, you were a Christian,
Right.
you were a peasant, and you worked the fucking fields, right?
Right.
And you prayed, or you were a brewer, blah blah, and you made beer, and you might have become a sailor on a sailboat, on a sailing ship, or you were a soldier. Your role in life was given to you. You had a role in life. You fit into life, right? And you were probably going to be what your father was and what your grandfather was, right? And if you were born rich and of noble blood or of aristocratic background, you were probably going to become a lawyer because that's what everybody did. They were studied law, and then they, took over the family banking business or the estate or managed the peasants in Eastern Europe or whatever. But it was all set to a certain degree. But the modern 20th century gave that power of character creation to us. Well, it put that effort onto us, and now every teenager, every child has to constantly decide what they want to be. What do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to
Right.
be when I don't fucking know what I want to be when I grow up, dude? You know what I mean?
It's I don't necessarily believe, and this might just be my own background speaking and my own egalitarian impulses coming out, but I don't believe that it's a mistake to say you don't have to do what your father did, or you don't have to do what your mother did.
Oh, I agree.
You don't have to fall into something that, it's been like, because that's just not the way the world is anymore, right? Industrialization, you have machines, you have technology, like there's all kinds of things that I can do that I wasn't able to do, that I wouldn't have been able to do before, right?
Right.
But the problem is that there's no guidance. Because in a lot of ways, most of us have never been here before. We have no idea what we're doing.
It's all new. Our parents
Yeah, a
couldn't
lot
help
of
us.
people do. Alex, you hit it. I don't think enough people understand how new all of this is. I remember what it was like before the internet. Guys, there is no way we have this figured out already. That
Right.
everything's working fine, that everything's functioning as it should, No, we're all look, the other Alex is going to love this, but I'm going to bring up Rush. All right. They got a line from a song called Virtuality. Absolute banger. I'm going to drop you a link so you can put it in there. I know you
Yeah,
don't like Rush
please.
as much,
I'll
but
put it in there.
dude, this song crushes, right? Anyway, there's this line that I thought of, and tell me how this hits. Astronauts in the weightlessness of pixelated space, exchanging graffiti with a disembodied race.
It hits.
Well, welcome to life, folks. That's
Right.
it. This is
That
the
that
world you live in right now. You are an
right.
astronaut in the weightlessness of pixelated space, exchanging graffiti with a disembodied race.
Right. Man, that's what it is. That's a poetic way of describing shit posting.
Oh, I know. It's just,
Right.
what do we like? I'm a castaway stranded in a desolate land. I can see footprints in the virtual sand.
Right. I've
That's
always
all of us. That's all of us. That's
yeah,
all of us.
I've always referred to my life as walking the digital labyrinth, basically, and
Bro, yeah,
getting
man.
lost because it just, it's just
It's
circular and we come back to the same over and over. And somewhere
Library
in the
of
labyrinth, there's a goddamn minotaur that's gonna fuck us up when we
yeah.
run into it.
I can't. Oh my gosh, that's a great way to say. It. I can't. Who was it? Borges, the Spanish writer
Right.
Borges. Right? Did I say that right?
Borges.
Borges. I apologies, but
I
he's
don't
got a
know.
story, doesn't he? Like the Library of Babylon.
He does. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what we're
He's
gonna
not
need.
he's not Spanish, he's Argentinian.
My mistake,
And
Argentinian.
the only reason I'm correcting you is
Of
because
course, no, by all
Neil
means,
from Pile and Press listens to this, and Neil would come through. He'd fly over here from
he'd cut
France
us.
and
He'd cut us.
slap me if
That's
I
fine.
got it wrong, because Neil is of Argentinian descent, and
Oh,
he's a
my great
Borges
apologies to your friend. My great apologies.
appreciator.
Yeah, but it's that Library of Babylon. It's that endless library, and you could burn down an entire wing, and it wouldn't impact
Anything.
anything. That's what the internet is. And we're all walking through it. And you make up a great point. There's a Minotaur out there. Maybe that's what Rothwell was talking about. The ghost. That's the Minotaur or the ghost. The cloud is the Minotaur
Right,
stalking the Library of Babylon.
right. And sadly, a lot of the books are just filled with lorem ipsum text.
Yeah, not even. Well, to be fair, it is lorem ipsum and titties, so that's kind of false.
And anime girls.
And anime titties, yeah, I suppose. Oh, Library of Babel.
Library Babel,
Yeah,
yeah.
your friend is probably now going, okay, I
Oh
got it.
my
He
God.
probably just stopped buying his plane ticket to come murder
Yeah,
us.
he's like this motherfucker,
Ah,
right?
they got it right. We're laymen, guys. We're laymen.
Look,
Okay.
if you guys haven't read Borges, you should.
Yeah. Oh my God. But yeah, the Library of Babel. I knew I was getting that wrong.
It is Library
Anyway,
Babel. And I should
see
have
this.
known because I just read it like 2 months ago for the first time.
Yeah. You know what? It's funny though. Just for everybody out there, so you know that our podcast has a hint of authenticity. Is that Alexander and I freely just get stuff wrong.
All the time.
And I think this is the first podcast where we've actually like looked stuff up to correct ourselves because in the back of our minds it's going, that's wrong, bro. That's wrong. That's wrong, bro. That's wrong. Just look it up. That's wrong, bro.
I
But
have
anyway,
a inability to remember actors' names or movie titles, even though they're like on the tip of my tongue, And it seems like an ongoing joke that people correct me. Like last week, The Hangover was the movie I couldn't
yes.
remember.
Yeah, I
And
couldn't remember
somebody
it either, to be
posted it
fair.
on the thing. I was like, "Oh yeah, The Hangover."
Oh,
I've
dude,
seen that
yeah.
movie like 20 times because
I've never seen it.
it's dumb. I mean,
I
it's
won't
like
see it.
it's
Yeah, no,
funny
I'm not gonna
dumb.
see it. Yeah.
The only movie out of that era I really liked was Hot Tub Time Machine because I thought it was a
Oh,
little bit smarter and it had the 80s thing to it. It's just one of those movies that you watch with your friends and smoke weed and that kind of thing.
yeah. That's
Um,
funny.
oh man, what have you
Been all over the place.
have you seen the whole sundress discourse on Twitter or whatever
I
that's
have
going
not.
on?
I don't have a Twitter. I've spent probably a total of 3 weeks on Twitter, period.
It's pretty awful nowadays. Every now and then I hop on because there's
I
a
mean,
few people I still like want to follow and see what they're up to from
I,
like
the only thing that's popped up for me, and this was TikTok, wasn't it? Was that Hawk or
oh yeah, yeah,
me?
yeah.
And only because the Star Trek memes are freaking lit.
I was dying. I was
Oh,
dying when you
oh,
posted
dude, Slade.
the
Hawk 2,
Tanagra.
his thing spat on. Freaking.
Are you a
There.
Star Trek guy? Did you like
Oh,
Star
dude,
Trek?
dude, I've written two pieces, one about Kirk and one about
Oh
Spock on my
yeah,
Substack.
you have.
And yeah, dude,
What do you
you
what do you
like,
think is the best of the Star Treks?
oh my gosh. See, I gotta pause for a minute. Is that when it comes to Star Trek, it's the original series, the movies, Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, and then right about Voyager, I kind of fell off the cliff
That's exactly where I'm at
and
too.
never came back.
I actually
I
never saw
really,
never saw
I
all of
actually,
Voyager.
I actually really enjoyed um, the first J.J. Abrams reboot, which is probably
Me
going to get me
too.
slaughtered by
No,
half
no,
our
me too. I did too. I went and saw it in theaters and I really liked it. I mean, I liked it for what it was. I thought it was fun
Yeah,
and like
yeah. Well, it's Star Trek. Like, don't expect this isn't, Rosebud having a baby with Hal from 2001, right? This
right.
this is not this is Star Trek. Okay, just relax. Um, but one thing I really loved about that is because the whole story, if Nimoy didn't do it, it wasn't going to happen.
Right.
He's the heart and soul of that, and that's probably why I like the Star Treks that I like because Nimoy had something to do with. I mean, that guy is the heart and soul of Star Trek,
Absolutely.
100%, hands down. Especially the Spock article that I wrote. For me growing up, all right. So you want to talk about how big of a Star Trek guy I am?
I'll go
Listen,
for it.
when it comes to Spock, a lot of people talk about masculinity, right? A lot of people talk about what's a gamma or sig, whatever that stuff is. Listen, for me growing up, it was Leonard Nimoy playing Spock, where you had this incredibly intelligent, incredibly well poised, strong individual. Like he could get it done when he needed to. But he presented this alternative masculinity that I, at least growing up, felt very. It appealed to me. I was a small kid. I wasn't a strong
Right.
kid. I wasn't interested in physical things. I was interested in comics and movies and music and reading, and I was into all that intellectual stuff. And the hilarious thing for me is like Leonard Nimoy was surprised how much of a sex symbol he became. He was just like,
You're right.
what?
I've seen interviews.
Oh,
I've listened to
dude.
interviews with him.
Yeah, man, because it's because he's a man in control. That's what it is.
Right.
It's there's this very funny moment that I had in my life where I was at a wedding, right? And we're talking about Star Trek, and this guy at the table, hip cat, right? Real hip dude. And he's looking at me, he's like, man, I love Star Trek, but the Vulcans, man, like they got no emotion. They got no emotion, man. Like, how could you, how could you, have a lover like that? How could you, and he's talking about, all that stuff. And I look right at him, I go, dude, there's 6 billion Vulcans on Vulcan. Like they clearly figured it out. And he
Right.
starts just dies. He's like, good point.
Well, they have
I'm
their
like,
little
bro,
ritual, their Ponfar
yeah,
ritual.
yes,
Come on.
exactly. Yeah, come on. Give me a break. And the whole thing about that species is that they have to be that way because they are so overly emotional. You know
Right.
what I
They
mean? That's the
control
whole thing.
themselves.
Right.
I mean,
But for me, okay, you asked originally. I'm gonna finish. I'll stop ranting when this is done. But for
we can talk
me,
about Star Trek forever. I like Star Trek.
oh bro, dude, we'll do a whole podcast on Star Trek. Done. Um, for me, I think it's two things. There's two moments that are peak Star Trek for me. The first one is in Wrath of Khan, when at the end, and this is the thing I wrote about in my Spock essay. At the end, when Khan has activated the Genesis device and it's going to explode,
Right.
and Scotty, I need warp speed in 3 minutes or we're all dead, right? Spock, focus on Spock during that because he looks, he stops, he pauses, he looks.
Spoiler
he gets it.
alert for people that have not seen Wrath of Khan, which should
Right.
be
If you
already.
haven't seen Wrath of Khan at some point, this is your own
this,
damn fault.
this is your spoiler
But anyway,
alert.
yeah, Spock just gets up, goes down to the engineering room, and gets it done. And it ties back to this is why I think Wrath of Khan is by far and away the best movie. And it actually gets into like legit fantastic film
Right.
territory.
It does. It does.
It really does. Because it goes back to that whole argument that him and Kirk have at the beginning, where the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one. And at the end, when Kirk and Spock are talking, he says, I never took the Kobayashi Maru test. What did you think of my solution? No one stops and goes, what the fuck was Spock's solution? It was self-sacrifice. And it was something he chose.
Right.
That is, what is more masculine than that, guys?
Right.
He sacrificed himself for the ship and saved everybody.
And what is more Christian than that, to be honest?
Right.
That is the whole point of.
Thank you.
It's distilled. When people say, oh.
Imperfect. Yeah.
When people say, oh, you worship a weak slave god that got crucified. No.
No, man. Absolutely
Spock
not.
wasn't a weak,
No,
he
dude.
saved the
ship.
Enterprise. He saved the
He
ship
saved
in
all
the
his
same
friends.
way Jesus Christ
Yes.
saved all our souls, guys, you fucking pagan jerks. Anyways. But yeah. Okay, what's another great scene?
And then the other thing is, generally speaking, the entire arc that Jean-Luc Picard goes through with the Borg.
Right, his
And
hatred of the Borg.
Oh, dude. And I know a lot of people get uppity about Picard but by the end, they wrap it all up. And dude, it's we could do a whole episode on Picard's arc with the Borg, because when you talk about the monoculture, when you talk about the totalitarian nature of society and the totalitarian nature of culture, it's the Borg.
Right.
And the whole arc with Picard is just keeping your individuality and keeping yourself in spite of. I mean, dude, he's Younger's Anarch at the end of the day. At the end of the day, and I'm going to say there's two moments that kill me for it. Number one, I posted about this earlier, but the scene in First Contact where he screams no and he smashes the phaser rifle against the ships, and he's not going to give up the Enterprise. The funny thing about that scene is everybody thinks that, oh, Picard relents. Well, no, he does the Spock thing. He goes down to face the Borg by himself. He realizes what he has to do. Right. And again, it's self-sacrifice. He might have to give up the ship, but the captain is going down with the ship. Right. You got everybody else off. Everybody else is fine. And he's going to go handle business. I mean, the thing with self-sacrifice is that you have to be willing to choose it. It doesn't mean you're going to die, because Picard doesn't die because Data's a he's the GOAT, right?
Right. He's the god hero in that series.
Right. So, Picard doesn't have to die, but he's prepared. He's ready. He's like, well, they're not taking the Enterprise and the captain's going down with the ship, even if it means my life. So it's that moment. And then the other moment, which is related to the Borg, is after, you have the episodes where he gets, spoiler alert, he gets assimilated by the Borg.
Right. Locutus.
Yeah. Do you remember the episode? That's actually a trilogy of episodes. Do you remember the one after where he goes back to France?
Yes.
Yes. So
back to his vineyard.
Yes. The scene in the vineyard where him and his brother have that fight. And he says, I wasn't strong enough. I wasn't good enough. I couldn't stop them. And he completely just, I mean, this just goes to show how good of an actor Patrick Stewart is. The guy
Right.
is
I mean,
a
he
goat, the
made that.
goat.
He made
He's a
that
goat.
series.
He is that character, right? He
Yeah.
he 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 himself says this. But those three moments, I think, Spock in Wrath of Khan, and then Picard in the episode's called Family, and then in First Contact, like that stuff is what just makes me sold, done,
Right.
perfect.
So my love of Star Trek came in so when I first moved to the United States. I was a little kid, like
Yeah,
6-year-old, and it used to be on Channel 13 back in the day. I don't know how it was up in Ohio, but it was on
I
UPN,
don't
I
remember.
believe it was called UPN,
Yeah,
and there was
yeah,
something pre-UPN. It was something else, but it was always on at 7 o'clock every day. Next Generation.
yes,
And my neighbor was my age, and her and I are still friends after 30 something years now.
nice.
And her and her dad were big Star Trek people, and got me watching it. And I watched it with my younger brother every day. We saw every single episode. I had all the action figures, I had the Enterprise, I had all that stuff, and I loved Star Trek. It was like my thing. I never got into Star Wars. I was just a Star Trek dude. Um,
Star Wars is all right, but I've always enjoyed Star Wars
I,
more.
I enjoyed it, but I don't love it. I love Star Trek more.
I mean, I've always enjoyed Star Trek more.
Yeah.
Listen, one other thing I'll throw out there, and this is just a little teaser, just so you understand. I joke about the Expanse a lot.
Hmm.
The Expanse dethroned Star Trek.
Really?
Straight up, dead ass. Yep. Now, you've got the TV show, but I've also read all the way through the books.
All the books?
Oh,
You know what? I might have to go. I might have to go back because, like I said, I stopped it after the first one. But okay, here's the thing, right? So I
anyway,
love the Next Generation.
yeah,
I had
Star Trek's
a
still incredible, though. I mean, I'm not even gonna.
family friends were big into the OG Star Trek, and that's how I was introduced
Yes.
to the movies.
Oh, dude, the
And
original series is still so
it's
good.
great. I mean, it's still very watchable, right? Some of it's
Yeah,
silly, but it's still
it's
very
good TV.
watchable.
Good
And
TV.
what, right? I mean, the episode that who was it? Harlan Ellis wrote the one with the time travel where they go back and they save that girl and then Hitler wins and all
Oh,
that
back in the
stuff.
30s. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great episode. You got Spock walking around with that skull cap beanie on, looking like a little beatnik, and
Classic. Classic. You got that one episode, too, where Spock steals the Enterprise to help out Pike.
right.
Oh,
It's
such a
great.
good. Yeah,
And
it's
look, I
lovely.
even like the one with the whales, man. Okay.
Dude, Star Trek 4 was fantastic.
I
Are you kidding?
enjoyed that one. And they're flying around in their bird of prey and shit.
So,
And
like, are you from outer space or something? No, I'm from Iowa. I only work in space. I mean,
it's a dumb movie, but it's a good dumb movie,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's just, hey, relax. Do you want to see Spock like fish out of water, nerve pitch a dude on a bus? What's not
Right.
to love?
Right. And he's got his little
Come on.
headband on with the hippies in the 80s or whatever.
If you
You know
don't,
what,
yeah,
what's funny is that Deep Space Nine came out when I was like, I think it was middle school, when we were in middle school, right? And I did not love it when it first came out. And then
well, I don't think anybody did. Not, I mean,
right,
some people did, but
in
it,
my
it it was a
20s,
change. It was a big change.
right, so in my 20s, because I was a Next Generation guy, so in my
Yeah.
20s, I dated this girl for a few years, and she was a Deep Space Nine person, right? That was her thing. And I would go to her house, and I think it was on FX all the time, and I watched the entire like Deep Space Nine, and I fell in love with it. And to this day, I feel like Deep Space Nine is my favorite out of all the Star Treks. And
Mm.
I mean, it's got Garrick, the
Plain
Cardassians,
simple Garrick.
Gold Dukat. It's got
Oh yeah.
Otto, who's a fan. Like that
Yeah.
that show really upped the acting.
What's the Ferengi guy's name? It's escaping me.
Quark.
Quark. Oh my God. Quark, Cisco.
And what I love, what's
Quark is in
interesting
it for
about
crying
it,
out loud.
so I just rewatched it recently. I say recently, but it was like 10 years ago with my wife because she's never been a Star Trek person, but we watched a lot of the episodes. And what struck me is when I was younger and I was watching Star Trek, I never liked the Bajorans. The Bajorans really
Oh yeah.
irritated me, right? Because I was like, oh, these religious nuts, and why don't they want to join the Federation? What the fuck, right?
Federation's perfect, man. Come on.
Right. And now
Yeah.
I'm like, God, I get the fucking Bajorans. I understand what they're doing. They don't want to be part of the European Union. They don't want to lose their culture. They don't want to trade their little
Right.
crazy ear things for like jumpsuits and stuff.
Yeah, that's what makes the Borg such a great enemy in Star Trek is because they are the end point of the Federation. If the Federation doesn't reel in its worst impulses, that's
They
where it ends
become the
up.
Federation, right?
Yeah, they
I
become the
mean,
Borg.
and
Yep.
a lot of people don't realize that. But remember,
Yes.
the Borg were introduced in the first episode. Well, no, the
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah,
the
in the
first
pilot.
the pilot,
The
right?
pilot. Yep.
And they were introduced as a basically as a warning from
Yeah.
Q, telling them like
Yes.
this is what you'll become. This is what you'll become. When he was judging humanity, and it's freaking. They're not just an alien race. They're the potential of humanity if it
Yes.
goes wrong. You know,
Listen, let's tie this back to everything that we've just discussed. Watch this. Q, right? Number
right?
one, John Delancey.
Is amazing. I
Q is
actually
one of the
ran into him once at a concert.
oh, you son of a bitch. Really? You met
Yeah.
you've oh
Because remember, I told you the girl into Deep Space Nine. Her aunt
yes.
was dating him for a while.
No. That's so good.
Um,
First off, amazing, amazing guy. And the the bromance between the friendship between Q and Picard is one of my favorite things in Star Trek
right.
for
I
sure.
also love
Especially when
that when Cisco punched him in the face.
dude,
That
of
was one of
course.
the best moments. It's like I'm not dealing with your shit.
Dude, Q episodes are so good. But Q is an omnipotent, right? All seeing, all knowing demigod, right? He stands above and beyond all of it, not
Right,
unlike a historian, right?
right,
And he points to Picard like we're pointing to so many people. You don't understand what you're dealing with. You're out in space, guys. There are things out here that you don't even want to know about, that you can't even conceive. And I don't think you're ready. Yeah, we're ready. We can handle anything with big new fancy enterprise and all right. But he does it also not only because ooh, and this is I'm gonna hit you with something I've thought about with Star Trek. He throws the Enterprise out there and they encounter the Borg, and it's a warning, but it also gives the Federation the leg up. It's probably the reason they survived the Borg at all.
right,
It's because they had a warning. Imagine if that cube showed up and the Federation had no idea.
right.
Done. Forget it. Right. And this is the thing. This is why I think Roddenberry's original vision is actually genius. And I'm sure a lot of people would probably yell at us because I've always heard how Star Trek is woke and Star Trek is this and Star Trek is that. And then, no, shut up. Listen, Roddenberry's vision is genius. It's not that humanity figures out all of its bullshit because, it's not that we figured out our bullshit and then we went to space, right? No. We go to space and that helps us, that makes us figure out our bullshit. Remember what you
Right,
mentioned earlier about how people we don't have any problems, we don't have anything to stress about, so we make things up?
right.
In space, you always have something to worry about. You always have something to fight. You always have something to struggle against.
You always have a
We all,
frontier.
yes, there is always a frontier to push.
Right,
Exactly. That's why the Federation and Star Trek and all that stuff. That's why it's a utopia, because humans always have something to do, and humans always have something that might straight up just murder them.
right. They can always
Whether we
go
like it or not.
west.
Yeah. Whether we like it or not, we need that.
Right. It
We
is
need
a
that to
fundamental
thrive as a
thing of,
species.
of our species. And it's wild. And yeah, people can say Star Trek is woke. And you know what? To a
I mean,
certain
okay, sure. What isn't these days? But
it's
anyway,
it's definitely a 20th century liberal American
yeah, it's Gene
show.
Roddenberry.
And
Absolutely.
it's very fascinating because you can look at Star Trek, and Star Trek, out of almost all the television shows, maps the psychological spiritual development of the United States. Because you have the early show,
Yeah,
Star
that's
Trek,
actually not
right?
a bad. That's not bad.
Well, you have the
Yeah,
early show, Star Trek, when
right.
you have a character in Kirk that is basically JFK to a certain degree, right?
Oh yeah,
JFK
100%.
was a PT boat, pretty
That's
boy, PT boat hero,
swaggering. Yeah,
right? That Star Trek is the Star Trek for the America that is out there fighting the Russians, fighting the Vietnam War, spreading freedom and democracy. This is theoretical. This is mythology, right? So I'm not saying that that's
right.
what we were doing, right? But I'm saying that's what we
That's
believed
the myth.
in,
That's what we
right?
thought. That's what we thought of ourselves.
We were in Captain Kirk's America, and Captain
Yep.
Kirk America had the heart of McCoy and the intellect of Spock at its side. You know,
Yep. It also.
science and, heart and principles, right? Yet we
Yep.
also had adventure,
Yeah.
right? And it was a
Think about.
modernization of a cowboy show. That's what Star Trek was
Yeah.
pitched
Wagon
as.
train in space.
Right. And I think Lucille Ball was the one that gave it the
Yes.
go ahead because she
Yep.
was awesome.
Lucille Ball is the reason we have Star Trek. 100%.
Right. I love
Think
Lucille
about the
Ball.
cat. Think about the cast too. What you just said with Kirk, Spock, and McCoy, and then look at the crew. You've got an Asian at the helm. You've got a Soviet Russian at the helm,
Right.
right? You've got a black woman on communications, right? All that stuff. Like, and it was cool. Like, yeah, all right. And no one was there because of what they looked like. They were there because they fucking all kicked ass.
Right.
They'd all earned it.
It was exciting. It was an
Yes.
America that had we're
Yeah.
going to fight for our ideals. And then you move into the next generation. And the next generation is an America that won the Cold War. The
Yes.
Federation in the next generation is the
Well,
dominant
that's
force almost.
that's Star Trek 6, right? Star Trek
Right.
6 is that, the asteroid exploding at the beginning of the movie. That's Chernobyl.
Right. It's basically the
It's
end
that it,
of
yes, it's
the Cold
yeah,
War.
it is. It's the end of that global civil war.
Right. And you see a lot more. Picard is a more mature, more intelligent, less emotional character
Less
than,
rakish.
yeah, less rakish than Kirk. More
Oh yeah, big
serious,
time.
more European. He's a European.
He
He's not
has
American.
I
It's
remember that he
basically
has a that he's got a reputation as a ladies' man, but that was like his wild days, like back in the day. He's not that anymore.
right. But what that Star Trek represents in America is America taking over as the world leader, right?
Right.
No longer the charging, fighting America, but now we're talking about America the diplomat, America that spreads its economic systems across the galaxy. And there's also there's a bit of Europhilia in it, right?
Yeah.
Kind of a um, looking back towards the past and kind of like maybe we shouldn't be this exciting. Maybe we should be more mellow. And it's interesting that Picard doesn't have a heart,
Literally. Yeah.
right? He literally does not have a heart. I mean, he does. It's a machine heart, but that's really interesting commentary comparing him to Kirk because Kirk is a very heart character.
Yeah.
Um, and
Oh
then you
yeah.
have Deep Space Nine, which is now Deep Space Nine is the 2000s America, where we start
Yeah.
questioning everything. Is the Federation good? You know what I
Well,
mean?
Wolf 359 is
Right?
9/11, and
Right?
it's Cisco trying to get over that.
Right. It's the
Yeah.
PTSD America almost.
Yes.
Are we the
PTSD
good
America.
guys? Should we spread the Federation? Maybe we should leave the Bajorans alone. How about these founders guys? Should we assassinate, should we basically exterminate the founders? You have all these interesting questions and you start seeing the cracks in the Federation. We're like, yeah, it's technically a moneyless society, but you still got to pay that latinum to Quark to be able to buy the
Yeah.
the good holodeck shows.
Right. Yeah. It's a moneyless society, but Quark's got the good shit.
Right, exactly. So even in the moneyless society, you still want to buy
No black
the
market.
the illegal holodeck programs. Look, I think we're gonna lose all our listeners for a fucking 40-minute discussion about Star Trek.
Soviet Purge of the Week.
Yeah, fuck them. All
Yeah.
right, maybe
They were
we'll
probably
talk
all
about
Borg. They were probably all Borg.
yeah. They were bored. Go get out of
They're
here.
just
Go
Borg.
back to Star Wars land over there with your Skywalkers and
Whatever.
your milk from the aliens boob or whatever. I know I haven't seen any Star Wars after the first of the not the new ones, but the last new ones, the New Hope or whatever. Not New Hope.
Yeah.
The one with the pod racers and the little kid.
Yeah.
That's the last one I've seen. I never even saw the second and third one of
for
that.
you.
I was like, I don't have patience for this shit. I went and saw it in the theaters and I was like, this is stupid. And then I never went to see any of the other ones.
We'll poop all over Star Wars in our Star Trek episode.
We will. We'll have a Star Trek Deep Space Nine
Oh,
episode. I haven't
geez.
seen any of the new Star Trek stuff though. I haven't seen Picard
Um,
or I don't even want to.
Picard, the first season of Picard's not bad. The second season I didn't watch because it didn't capture me. I can't remember how much through the third season of Picard they go, but they get one of the OG guys from Next Generation, and this dude just cracks the whip, and it's like, boom, everything's perfect.
The
And they
show?
literally like the finale. I've seen the finale. and the final like struggle against the Borg, dude. I have never seen a finer, just again, what you said about Star Trek, like it maps onto the American psyche. Dude, spoilers, okay? But the Borg implant a bunch of basically like sleeper agents into the young of Starfleet,
Hmm.
and they use the young of Starfleet to launch a coup against all the older people. All the ships are networked. So like they basically take over Starfleet in a snap through indoctrination and going after the young. So they pull a BG, they pull a Battlestar Galactica, they
Right.
pull the D, a replica of the D out of dry dock, out of the museum, and because it's quote unquote analog, and they just start slapping bitches. And it's,
Nice.
dude, it's the most badass shit ever because it's just the Enterprise D just literally swinging the D and just whacking everybody. It's amazing. It's just
Did
it's pure fan service.
Did you watch?
But the underlying thing is like, holy shit, you have this Borgy monoculture, right? You see what I'm saying?
Right. Right.
It's just, oh,
Right. That's indoctrinating the
yeah.
young.
You got to go
Man.
to the old ways. We got to show them the old ways.
Right. Man. Even in the most shit lib of things, the truth is always the truth, right?
The truth is the truth. Yes. Yeah.
Right.
It's the old ways. It's the unplugged, unnetworked enterprise.
Right.
It's the old time. I mean, dude, one of my favorite tropes is the old timers that just slap the shit out of everybody.
Right. Me
They know all
too.
the tricks. They know all the experience. They know everything. They're just like, watch this. And they don't even do anything. And like everything's, they're just like, see? Because we know how this works. Because
This
we
is
know how
how
truth works.
this
We
is
know
how
how
we
reality
roll.
works. Yeah.
Did you like Battlestar Galactica, the new one?
I did.
I loved it
Yes.
too.
Very
I
much.
think it's one of the best sci-fi shows of all time.
Yeah. Well, it's good in the same way that like Firefly and
Right.
Star Trek and Expanse are good. They have that hero ship, you know, and
Right.
everybody. It's the ship versus the world.
Oh, come on. Those early episodes are so intense when they're blowing people out of the locks because the ship's on fire,
Yep.
or the countdown of how many people are still alive
Yep.
when they're jumping, and every time they jump, more Cylons come after them.
Oh,
It's so,
dude,
so
like
good, so good.
tension, and all they're trying to do is get the Galactica bullets.
And then Xena's in it, man. So that's
Yeah.
yeah, that's cool. Okay, you know what? We're gonna end it soon because we've been on for 2 hours. But before we end it, I want to talk about something else. What
One
is
more thing.
what is your favorite sci-fi movie?
Oh, I'm going to defer to the master and say 2001: Space Odyssey.
Okay,
I am fully of the belief that that is the single best science fiction movie of all time, and nothing has remotely come close.
all right, I like
Not that
that.
other films are bad. That one was just that could have been the only sci-fi film, and we would have been fine.
You'd be happy. Okay.
Yes, hundred
Have you
percent.
seen Have you seen Tarkovsky's Stalker
I
or
have not.
Solaris?
No,
Those are
no.
two
Oh,
good
I've seen
Russian ones.
Solaris. I haven't seen Stalker.
Um, I like out of a more recent sci-fi movie that I really really liked, and I saw like 4 times in the theater, is Children of Men.
Ooh,
Have you seen that
that was
one?
a good one. That was a good one.
I'm a big fan. That's one that I feel like that movie is under a conspiracy, okay? I feel like it's a movie that is fantastic. Both the cinematography
Hmm.
and the themes and the whole point. It's based on an exceptionally Christian book novel. Um,
I only saw it once, but I can play. This says a lot for the film, or maybe it just, you know, I'm an idiot. But like, I'm picturing the film right now, like you because you mentioned cinematography, and I'm like, you're right. I'm like playing scenes in my head right now, and I've only seen the film once, and it was 20 years ago.
oh, but it's one of those movies where every scene,
Yeah.
just the stuff
Yes.
in the scene tells a story,
Yes.
the movie starts off with, you see what's his name, oh, what the hell's his name, the main character, the actor, I'm gonna
Clive Owen.
Clive Owen, right? There we go.
Yeah.
We don't have to get corrected. Clive Owen is working in this office, and everybody's crying about baby Antonio who just died. The youngest man got stabbed outside of a bar in Brazil or some shit like that.
Yes, I
And you
remember.
see his desk, and his desk is empty. He has nothing on it. Everybody else has all these trinkets and all this stuff. And Clive Owen is the ultimate nihilist in a nihilist world. He holds on to
Or the
nothing.
ultimate anarch.
Yeah, he is the ultimate
He
anarch.
only hangs on to himself.
Right. He is completely devoid of any attachment to anything. And then
It's
he
funny.
lies to get the day off. He goes,
Yeah.
like literally he was blown up in like an like in a terrorist attack and he's deaf. He's like, he's got ringing, but that's not what he tells his boss. That he's like, no, I just want to go home and cry about baby Diego or whatever. And they're like, yeah, okay, go ahead and go home. And he doesn't give a shit about baby Diego. But this guy is the ultimate nihilist that gets brought back into belief, and he becomes a it's filled with so much religious symbolism. I mean, if you watch the movie, and I recommend a rewatch with these thoughts in mind, is he's
Yeah.
walking around barefoot most of the time,
Yes, I remember.
right?
Yes,
Which is
that's
such a
right.
symbolic element.
Write that
And
down. Write that down. We need to
right,
watch it. Then we need to watch it.
Children of Men. And dude, it is such a great. I just watched it again recently, and I remember I went and saw it in the theaters when it came out, and
Yeah.
I think I was like 20 something, and it just blew my mind. I was like, this movie's amazing, and I went and saw it like 3 or 4 times because all my friends loved it. We went and just saw it over and over and over, and it has that scene with the long scene with the kid, the baby's born, and the soldiers are he's coming out, he's showing the
Hmm.
baby to the soldiers, and some of them are crossing themselves, and it's just this insane like movie that's so pro-natalist and pro-humanity. And I think
Yeah.
when I said I think there's a conspiracy theory, I think it never gets mentioned in like shit-lib sci-fi circles because of that.
Because it's so pro. It's
Because
so
it's so
positive.
right, it makes people
It's
feel
hopeful. It's
very
ultimately hopeful.
it has to make people feel very uncomfortable when the majority of modern shitlibbery science fiction is very anti-natalist. Then you have this natalist masterpiece. Anyways, go watch Children of Men if you haven't seen it. And Fisto, I think we're gonna call it a day. We'll talk
Done
next
and done,
week.
sir. Sounds like a plan.
All right, and for you listening, God damn it, man, I don't know how to talk anymore. For you listeners out there, please like, follow, share, follow me on YouTube and on Spotify because the more likes we get, the more exposure we get. And the more exposure we get, the more I feel like doing this because I like to talk to not
The
just
more
a void.
help us bring the young into the light.
Right, and for you
Have
guys
them
supporters,
understand what the old timers can do.
right. For you supporters of the podcast and listeners, all right. Uh, I'm going to try to do one of these every Tuesday with Fisto, without Fisto. We're going to try to get
Woo!
Lisa Kuznek on. Maybe we'll get Alexander, Helene. I want to do a 3 people episode. We'll try. I want to try that to see how my internet holds that going.
Yeah, man.
Um, but I want to do this indefinitely. But I'm also going to continue to do the one-on-one interviews where they're about the person I'm interviewing. So don't fear. We are going to go into some one-on-one interviews, like like the original intent of the podcast. But I
It
think
won't be
that
Alex and some asshole forever.
right, it will be Alex and some asshole forever. Well, I might even invite Fisto to come interview people.
Oh,
But
geez.
ultimately, if it's a historical type thing, you can
There you
join
go.
me. Okay, I'll
There you
bring
go.
in subject matter experts. All right, but if I interview people about Rush, we'll bring in Alex because he actually
Yeah,
wrote a
yeah.
book
Oh
on
no, I
Rush.
would completely defer to that man on everything
Right,
Rush. By
and
all
all I
means.
all I know is Tom Sawyer. That's like the extent of my Rush knowledge, and not
That guy is to Rush what I am to the Spanish Civil War.
right. Um, and remember, guys, your opinion on sundresses is your own. And live long and prosper, guys. Like, share, and comment. Good night.
Good night.